Okay, morning everyone. I'd like to make a start. I'm going to be turning the agenda around, moving it a bit slightly this morning to adapt with people we've got here. I'm very pleased to welcome Steve Montgomery and his team from Avanti, who's coming to talk to us about that item on the agenda a little later on. So that's item number 4. And I'm going to take that once we've done with the apologies on declarations of interest. If everybody is here, that's the actual relevant people. I'd be reluctant to start that item before Andy and Steve are here. But I know Steve Montgomery has got to get a trade later on, so he's on a very tight timescale. But we'll see how we're making progress. Yeah, that's what I want to do. But there's other things I can do on the agenda. But that's what I want to do. But no, exactly. Okay. Any recorded apologies? Julie?
Yes, Chair. We've had recorded apologies from Mayor Driscoll, Councillors Kemp, Rennick, Warmby, and David Williams, as well as Helen Simpson and Alexander Beatty.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any declarations of interest that any members wish to record that need to be done at this stage? Okay. Well, I think what I might do is I'll start on the minutes from the previous meeting, and we'll see how we get on with those, and we can always take a pause if Andy and Steve arrive. Martin.
Chair, if I might, you've got the minutes of the last meeting before you. You've also got a copy of the quarterly operating report, which we do circulate outside of the meetings, but we always bring it to this meeting as just to give you an update on that. And you've also got my brief update from on a number of items. And if I may, I'll just pick on a couple of those things and expand upon them. First of all, I would just say, you'll see in my update there's a report back about the conference in Liverpool, which was, I think we thought was a good event. We can always do even better, and we will be planning for next year accordingly. As you will see from the note, we do take it around the region over the course of the years, and we're planning on taking it to somewhere in or around York next year, as it will be an opportunity to come across the Pennines again for that. Also, just to pick up in the conference, we heard from the Rail Minister about his commitment and his support for the extension of the Midland Main Line electrification all the way through to Sheffield, which I think was very much welcomed by the conference. And I think I just wanted to make that point to the meeting, because we've been in conversation with colleagues in other parts of the country, and it may well be that at some point in the near future they'll be looking for our support to make the case for that business case going forward. So I just wanted to make the board aware that if we are approached, we would be on your behalf saying definitely. And I just wanted to check with Councillor Hunt amongst other things, but more generally amongst the board. There was good news in terms of road investment around the A66. Richard Leonard from National Highways, is there anything else you wanted to add there? Yeah, and if you could just do your microphone as well.
Yeah, just to say, really great news about the A66 approval at the DCO and approval to proceed. And I suppose a thank you to colleagues in the room and partners in the room. You know, it's a long time coming. It's a collective effort, and it is a transformational project for the North. And you know, and it's important. And also just to tell the team, we've had approval to submit the DCO for Simster, so that will be going on the 2nd of April, which is another key part of a jigsaw for connectivity improvements in North Manchester to support Avon Valley. So lots of good news on roads, as you say.
Could we just know what the schedule is now for the A66 exactly?
So it's in appeal, challenge appeal for the moment. So it's up to the end of April in terms of the appeal period, and then we will progress the work. What I would say to colleagues is we are already doing some preparatory work, some archaeological work, some preparation works for delivery. So we are running in parallel with the DCO. But hopefully, towards, I think it's mid to end April, we'll know whether we've had a legal challenge. If not, it's all systems go.
So, Chair, just carrying the update, and also at my previous update, we talked about we were hoping to get the draft of the road investment strategy for the next 5-year period. I think I would just say to this board, we're disappointed as the executive, and I think you know, the lack of clarity on the forward programme is actually quite concerning, given the importance of the road network alongside the rail network, and we'll no doubt continue to work closely with National Highways about making sure that that is taken forward. I wanted to draw attention in the note to the conversation that I had with the chair and the two vice chairs around the issue of diversity of thinking around this board. We've put a little bit of a note in the covering note about how we are trying to make sure we have that diversity of thinking. And I've just been saying to Claire, in the context, and Mayor Brabin, in the context of Conventional North, I was particularly struck by the voice of young people that we had at the Conventional North. I thought it brought an energy and a focus to the conversation, and I'm already having a conversation with Katie as the Director of Strategy about could we kind of build upon that kind of momentum?
Thank you, and I really welcome this paper regarding diversity, because we've raised many times, haven't we, that it doesn't feel like the board reflects the people that we serve. Just regarding Convention of the North, just to raise just a small query, whilst in the paper it does suggest that lived experience is incredibly important to help us with our thinking, that it is not, the answer is not that we don't need lived experience because we have the data. Just to get reassurance from the board that actually lived experience is as important as data.
I certainly can give you that reassurance, Mayor Brabin. I get the point and totally understand. I know my colleagues on the executive are very much seized by that, so please be reassured.
Hughes, did you want to come in earlier on? Sorry.
Well, on the A66 dualling, it's good news for some people, no doubt good news for many businesses, but it won't be overwhelmingly helpful for the former Cumbria area, for Westmoreland and for the new Cumberland, unless we can resolve the significant parking problems in towns such as Penrith and Keswick. And I flagged that up within my own authority. The preponderant view has always been in favour of the dualling, so I acknowledge that, but there are many environmental concerns as well. I just wanted to ask some questions about the young people's representation at the convention. Is that, well, the Chief Executive just referred to.
Yeah.
So similarly, I'd like to ask whether young people from the area I represent and probably Cumberland as well were involved in the Citizens UK partnership, which presented. Sorry, this is referred to on page 30 in the papers, and also our own TFN Citizens Panel, Northern Voices, and finally, I'd also like to ask about the stakeholder forum, which is referred to in the second bullet point on 31, and what's the timescale for this to be set up, please?
Thank you. Just, if I may, just to the Citizens UK, I absolutely agree that the young people were incredible. They made us realise why we're actually doing this. But let me take that away, Councillor Hughes, because the makeup of Citizens UK is of their making, actually. It's not necessarily something that we curate. But Vic, my colleague, it's her last TFN board. As she leaves us for London, I'm gutted. She will take this away and we'll get some detail for you.
That'd be very...
And Chair, if I might, Katie, can you just pick up about the Northern Voices panel?
So Northern Transport Voices is representative of communities and different ages, different backgrounds right across the north. It's only a small community at the moment. Our ambition is to grow that to 2,000 members over the course of the next year. And in relation to the stakeholder panel, the stakeholder forum, our intention is to try and pull that together within the next 6 months. We've got some early proposals that we'll be working through as an executive and testing with your teams as well.
Thanks. And to make it fully geographically representative of North.
Absolutely,
That's Thank you very much.
As much as we can.
And Chair, just a couple of final things in terms of that, just sort of parish notices around my update. You'll see at the bottom of the report that we talk about working with you as a board, working with your partners around a spending review submission over the next couple of meetings. And my final note under this is just to, in some ways, it's a sort of a slightly sad announcement I'd like to make, but I need to advise the board that my colleague Darren Oldham, who sat to my right, has decided that it's a time to take a step back from full-time roles, full-time director roles, so he will be seeking some new opportunities in a slightly different role. So he will be leaving us at the end of May. Just to reassure the board that I've already got processes in hand to secure recruitment of a replacement. Based upon the attraction we've been able to get for recent recruitment more generally for TFN, I'm confident we'll have a really good pool on which we can draw people moving forward. I'm using this as an opportunity just to shuffle a couple of responsibilities within the team, and so I'm delighted to be able to say that following consultation, etc. with staff, I'm going to be making Katie Day both the Director of Strategy and the Deputy Chief Executive moving forward. She will take on that role from the 1st of April. It'll bring together a number of connections more strongly. I know Katie has been on a journey with us already, and I think she's been doing a fantastic job, and I hope the board would be comfortable in supporting in that appointment. The staff have all been advised about the change in relationship with Darren leaving and Katie moving into that role. And there will be a cascade letter going to partners after today's board meeting, just advising on that. So I'm sure there'll be opportunity for us to say thank you to Darren later, but I just wanted at the moment to support on record my personal thanks and the thanks of the team for what Darren's done in terms of helping us move on the foundations we've got. But Chair, that was the last of my update.
Okay. Martin, can I echo your thanks to Darren for his work, and also congratulate Katie on assuming her new role as of the 1st of June. April, sorry, right. Okay, any points that anybody wishes to raise on what Martin was reporting on there? No? Okay, fine, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just, sorry, and morning everybody, nice to make it fun. I just wanted to put on record my thanks to Darren as Chair of Rail North Committee. He's provided outstanding support actually, and really insightful always and helpful, and always looking for solutions for us as a committee and then here at the board. So I just didn't want to let the moment pass actually, just to say that. I think you've done a great job for us, Darren. I think particularly as we unpack the issues on TPE, you really helped us do that, and we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Burnham. I mean, that is certainly echoed by myself as well. Right, I want now to take item, well, we are at item 4, so I don't need to take it out of place. Steve, I'd like to thank you for coming along this morning. You know that there has been very, very serious concern about the service that's being provided on the West Coast main line, and I'm very grateful for you coming today to talk to the board. There is a lot of unhappiness about the way the service has been operating, but I know you're going to have an opening few minutes and then take some questions, and then we've got a paper that we may wish to discuss further on from there. So, Steve, can I ask you to address the meeting? Thank you.
Okay, Chair, thank you very much, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to come along this morning. Clearly, we have obviously experienced a number of problems within Advanti West Coast. And first of all, I'd put in record, and we apologise to everybody for the inconvenience that that's caused, particularly to customers and to stakeholders as well, where the service has just not been up to the level that we would want. And as you would expect, it's not just a simple thing of saying, well, it's this or it's that. There's a number of things that come into play. And I think it's useful to come back through. I think we spoke at these boards probably going back a year and a half ago, of where we were starting to make progress. We did start to see the cancellations on Advanti West Coast drop quite considerably. But since October, November time, they have crept up to a higher level again, which has been disappointing. And there's a number of reasons behind that in terms of, we had the cancellations down at the top. This is where the talk itself causes the cancellations, down to about 1.5%, which was a level that is in the norm it takes for a fleet fault of somebody sleeping in. But that has grown over the last number of months, accumulating in December to very high levels in the month of December. It slightly dropped back again, but still far too high, roughly about 7% in the last period. Now, the reason behind that was the fact that we started to see a as the rest of the industry has seen as well, the national disputes that are in place. Advantage West Coast had a rest-day working agreement that was in place that allowed us to very small levels of training, etc., which worked along, but everybody was reasonably flexible in their movement. Those situations changed slightly, and as again, not just in Advantage, but across the rest of the industry, round about October, November time, where we started to see areas of the industrial impact from the national position impacting a lot of businesses, where there was less of the flexibility that we've maybe have seen before. And that's proven very challenging to us, and we have really struggled with, on certain days, providing a service to customers. Particularly Saturdays, we've seen quite significant cancellations on Saturdays. Again, we have got very historical terms and conditions that are there. We have to live with them. We just have to try and manage through it. But it does make us very vulnerable, particularly when there's a loss of flexibility on top of that. So what we've been trying to do over the last number of months is how do we try and get this back into a sensible place. We have been working closely with the trade unions within Advantage to try and see whether we can get more flexibility back in. It is difficult because of the national position of where we would normally agree local agreements and productivity. That's not been possible at this moment in time. We put a lot of resource in from the centre at First Group to help the team at Advantage, giving them additional timetabling, planning, project management resources. So we'll try to help as much as we can on the day, but that flexibility is the area that we've really struggled with. So what we have managed to do with ASLEF and working very closely with them at this moment in time is how do we try and get more cooperation back into the business. I'm pleased to say that last week we managed to secure a rest day working agreement with the trade union, which gives us, it in itself is going to be very helpful, but it also gives us that kind of cooperation back in, and hopefully we'll start to see that grow over the next number of weeks and months. We've already started to see it over last week and getting into this week as well, where we're starting to see people making themselves available. It'll take a bit of time, please, that will not turn around overnight, but it certainly will get a lot better as we continue to work together to try and drive this forward. So there's a number of things that we're trying to do. We've also got the new trains that are coming into the north, the new Hitachi trains that are going to service the northwest in particular, going up into the Wales. So those new trains have started to arrive and we've started training. That in itself put a bit of pressure on us as well, and it's one of these conundrums of we don't start the training, we can't bring the new trains in. If we don't bring the new trains in, it then impacts in other parts of the industry. So what we've started to do is the training. With this rest day working agreement, that will help us to be able to push training along at a quicker rate than we might have thought, might have been able to do without it. It'll allow us to bring the new trains in, hopefully starting over the summer months. There's some of them out there running just now for training purposes. But that will then start to see some of these new trains coming in, which is obviously a greater impact, and particularly environmental impact, rather than running 100% diesel under the wires. We're starting to run electric, in the electric mode under the wires, and then only on diesel for the short part into Wales. So there's a lot of good things will start to happen over the next number of months, but I do accept it's been an exceptionally difficult period for customers over the last number of months. And we, as I say, I'll apologise again for that. As the industry, we've got challenges. As Advantage West Coast, we've got challenges. We are trying to sort some of those out. I think we're on the way to doing some of that, but there's clearly more that we can do, more that we will want to do. I think it's important that communication with the North is kept open. I do think that we need to have and I want to make myself available for more meetings, particularly with the mayors, to try and ensure that we keep them updated with what's happening. We're obviously working very close with the Department for the Transport and the ministers to make sure that we are trying to deliver all the things that we want to deliver for customers. So it's really important that we continue to do that. And as I say, I am more than happy to come back to these meetings. I'll have separate meetings with the Transport for the North to see how we can push forward things. Sorry, Chair. No, I was just going to say, if Andy wants to, if I've missed anything, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. So Andy Mellors, Managing Director for Avanti. I know in the paper as well there was mention of the second hourly service to Liverpool, so thought it was worth just mentioning there that we have the new trains coming into the business to be able to operate those services. We are wanting to move forward with the first of the additional services as soon as we have the operational resilience to do so. It is in the base timetable for the summer, starting from June, so we hope to start the operation of the first of those additional services shortly thereafter when the trains are available and the drivers have been trained. And then we're working with our partners at Network Rail as to what the trajectory will look like in terms of operating further services on that route in the second train every hour, given some of the constraints on the infrastructure. And we're working very closely with the team on Merseyside with a marketing partnership agreement as well, recognising the opportunity that those extra services will bring to capacity and visitors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both, Steve and Andy. We've got 20 minutes where I know that Steve has to leave by 11:15, so he's got he's come up specially for this meeting and has got a meeting this afternoon which he's got to be back in London for. So if I see a number of people. So what I want to do is take 2 or 3 people and then take questions. And then I want to come back to Mayor. I give Mayor Burnham an opportunity early on, but I will also come back to him at the end as he is chairman of the Rail North Committee. So that's just so everybody knows roughly where the timetables are going to be. Can I start with Councillor Gittings, please?
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming to speak to us today. I'm Louise Gittings, leader of Cheshire West and Chester Council, as well as being Vice Chair of Transport for the North, a chair group called Growth Track 360, which lobbies for better connectivity between England and Wales. And whilst I appreciate all the work that you're putting into this, I'm afraid the residents of Cheshire and Warrington region aren't seeing improvements to the service. They haven't seen improvements to the service in the last 18 months. I was in London last week. My train coming back was cancelled. The one behind was severely delayed. This time it was to do with a fault on the train. So I can't see how things in the short term or even the medium term are going to improve. It's great that you can put an extra train onto Liverpool, because sometimes I choose to get a train from Liverpool because the Chester trains are so unreliable and so infrequent. We have become a branch line. But I think my concern would be if you can't operate the service that we've currently got, how are you going to put that extra train on, and where are the drivers going to come from, and will that result in less trains on the North Wales line? So I have got some serious concerns that haven't gone away since I spoke at the last meeting. Thank you.
Do you want to take a number of questions, or do you want to say?
I think it might be better if you take it, but I think as Louise is vice chairman, I'd like you to deal with those first and then take some others.
Again, apologies, we are well aware that the impact we're having in North Wales, it's been quite disruptive for yourselves. Your answer of how do we make it more reliable, the fact is, that, as we said, as well as having rest day working coming back, which will obviously help things, we've got more drivers that are going to be trained in Holyhead in particular. We've seen a shortage of drivers there due to ill health retirements, those type of things. So there's 3 new drivers that become active from the beginning of April, or the first week in April, I think it is. So that will help the situation, make it more reliable for those services. So you'll probably see at the moment we're cancelling quite a few trains from Holyhead down to Crewe. So that will help the situation. In terms of the number of drivers we have in the overall business, we have a lot of drivers in the business that at various stages of training. We've passed out a significant number of drivers. We are now putting the new trains that come in, that put pressure on to try and take drivers off of running turns. So hence why you said to me at the moment, you know, how you're going to bring these new trains in. That's what we need to do. We've got to take drivers off their jobs to start that training. That's what I was alluding to earlier. It's a bit of a trying to balance the books at the moment. But these 3 new drivers coming out will certainly make the North Wales services far more reliable. So we should see quite an improvement.
Okay, I am noting on the time. Claire Haywood and then Mayor Braben.
Thank you, Vicar Nick. So I have a couple of roles, Chair of Treasury One and also Chair of MP11, which is the Northern Powerhouse 11, but also run a global business from the Northwest for the last 30 years. And I went to London for 30 years, 3 days a week on the West Coast Main Line, so I know it very well. Avanti, I don't think has ever actually got back to the level of service we had with Virgin, and I'm not sure there's actually ever been a good debate about that. I think there's what I would love to hear is about 2 things. One is I think you've lost the trust of business, and I think that and confidence, which really is impacting our ability to deliver. But also I think there's a lack of trust from your employees. And if you think about how important leadership and management is in terms of ensuring that you haven't got people that don't turn up because they've slept in, and that is a concern, that we aren't actually focusing around a strategic, resilient workforce planning system. You know, running trains on an hourly, 2-hourly basis shouldn't be a surprise in terms of how many drivers we need, and we're still talking about what we could do from a training perspective. I suppose my concern is the level of resilience that's being put into your training and your workforce planning system. And I still don't feel confident that you'll be able to get back to a level of service, given the level of trust that you have within the organisation and the culture within Avanti, and also then the trust and confidence that you have in the business environment. So I think there's a lot of work to do, and listening to you both, if you don't mind me saying, I'm not convinced that we've got a handle on exactly what is required for business to be able to deliver in the Northwest.
If you don't mind, sorry, Chair. No, if you don't mind, we have got a lot of work to do with staff. It's an industry problem as well. It's not just an Avanti problem. You know, we've been in disputes now for 2 years. It's very difficult for staff.
Yeah.
It's difficult for the management teams who are trying to work together. We're caught up in various, I don't need to say it, various political issues that go on through all this. We are trying to manage through that. It is hard. We do know how many people we need. We have got people in the business. We know what the plan has to look like. We know what the timetable was from Virgin through to what it is now. It's obviously a lot less than what it was during that period of time. We have got plans to grow that as customer demand comes back. We understand the impact that has on businesses. You know, in particular, how do we move people out of London? How do we get them to the north? How do we get them down into London for meetings that they can rely on? So that we are aware of all these different elements. Whilst we are doing what we're doing at the moment, and we're up front, we know that we don't have that confidence. The only way we can give you confidence is start to deliver that service day in, day out. And then that will even take time of where we build the trust up. Staff are getting, if I can say, getting pushed and pulled every way at this moment in time. And it makes it difficult for them to engage, because there's obviously challenges from, as I say, well, you know, we've got the trade union issues, the pay issues that are out there. We've got to try and get that out the way as well, and that's one of the key things that we're trying to solve. We're nearly there with RMT. I think we've got, you know, a reasonable good place. ASLEF we're still working with. We need to do more work with ASLEF and try and solve and block that problem at the moment. And I do believe that we can take that off the table as well, then it will accelerate even more the recovery, but it will take time. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Obviously, mayors and colleagues from the Northwest will speak more articulately about the challenge, but quite frankly, it feels like an echo of TransPennine Express, that it's always someone else's fault, and your problem is now becoming my problem, that people in London are now travelling to Leeds and then cramming onto Transpennine to get to Manchester. We've got services that are overcrowded, people sitting on floors. When I'm trying to get businesses to come to Leeds and to West Yorkshire, Leeds the best place to live in the north, when actually you can't get from London to Leeds because people going to Manchester are stuck on those trains. So quite frankly, I feel that what I've heard just feels absolutely what we heard before for Transpennine. And somebody who uses Transpennine, going back into operator of last resort, actually has brought stability, which I can say with confidence to my businesses, at least now you'll be able to get staff into Leeds and across to Manchester because we have that stability. So I'm very disappointed, and I would like to know what conversations you're having with Transpennine and LNER on their budgets and their capacity. And do you have data that when you have cancellations and when you have difficulties, that when you sneeze, we're catching the cold? So I wouldn't mind knowing what conversations you're having with other operators.
Well, there's industry cooperation that we obviously have between if there is disruption, which might be, any type of disruption. So it's not just cancellations caused by staff shortages. It could be, infrastructure disruption. And both operators agree that they can use each other's services. So people from, if the East Coast main line was shut, people can travel up via Advanti West Coast and come into Manchester and travel across. So that works across the industry, that we try and help each other. So that is ongoing discussions that we have. So again, going into the operator of last resort, the challenges still remain. Transpennine clearly have managed to get a rest day working agreement. We have now managed to secure a rest day working agreement. Transpennine reduced their services from what was previously there. That has brought more stability to the thing. So we are not proposing to do that in West Coast. At this moment, we are saying that we want to work our way through this. So there's various different factors that have helped the situation with Transpennine. We hope to try and stabilise West Coast, as I said earlier, and that will then bring some stability so that we can have a reliable service for customers. As I say, there will always be situations of where there's a challenge on a line of route for whatever reason it might be, a fatality, an infrastructure failure, or a train breaks down, and then we do trade between both companies. So we do that quite often.
Mayor Rotherham.
Thanks, Chair. The issue really is about what the impediment of poor services are, not just to local areas, but to the economy as well. And this is a false economy whereby we're overseeing as a country poor connectivity right the way across the country at a time when we've got a cost of living crisis and we need economic growth to get ourselves out of the current situation. And I don't believe that any train operating company can act in isolation. They can't just say, well, this is our business and we'll handle it the way that we want to handle it. The only area in the country that hasn't had industrial relation problems over the last few years is Merseyrail. And that's because I instructed Merseyrail to find a settlement through meaningful negotiations. And that's prevented all of the problems that occur in elsewhere happening on our network. We don't have any of that. And relationships are much better. The real issue for us now is that we've seen a deterioration in services over a sustained period now for Avanti West Coast mainline services to Liverpool. In fact, I've got the stats, but you'll know them. Sometimes there have been 50% of services that have been running. And that does have a huge economic impact on our area. We are, obviously, we have a very growing and buoyant visitor economy. But if people don't know that they can get to and from somewhere, they are less likely to travel. That's through all of the evidence that's been provided. So I think, Steve, we need some more certainty about an improvement journey for the company. And I don't get that at this moment. I've had conversations with Andy and others about what's going to happen. It's great that if we can get a second service, but I noticed the caveats on that second service now. As soon as we have operational resilience, that was the terminology just used, as soon as we have operational resilience, none of us are certain that that's likely to happen very, very quickly. So that, me, causes further concerns about that second service between Liverpool and London. All the Lennon data, or whatever it's called now, indicates that Liverpool is the #1 destination of choice, and yet we have hourly services, and those hourly services are often up to 56% not running. So something needs to happen, and I think we collectively need to have some assurances, Chair, about performance, about improved performance, and a deadline on that. And then at that deadline, if that's not there, then we need to take further action, which I think could be calling for the operator of last resort, is it OLR, last resort, yeah, OLR as an option for that. But something needs to happen to give passengers some assurances that things are going to get better.
Thanks very much. I am conscious of time, both on when Steve's got to leave and also the number of people who want to come in. So can I ask others who want to come in? I'll take Councillor Swarbeck and then Councillor Rowlow in that order before I get Steve to come back. And I want to give plenty of time for Councillor Corcoran and for Mayor Burnham to wind up. So unless anybody else wants to come in, that would be the order. Councillor Hughes, but right, okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I will keep my comments very brief and lend Lancashire's support to all the points that have been made by the contributors thus far, with the obvious exception that I would have to challenge Mayor Brabin's assertion that Leeds is the best place to live as a Lancastrian. So the War of the Roses has reignited. Other than that, thank you, Chairman.
You lost me there. I wasn't quite ready for that retort. Councillor Rowlow.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Denise Rowlow from Cumberland Council, and I think obviously in your talk there you were saying about resilience from London to the north, and we need to remember that the north goes further than Preston, and the issue we've got with our residents as they can only get to Preston, and getting any further than that to Carlisle Station is virtually impossible. They get thrown off a train at Preston and there's no support to get any further than that. But also what we've got is we've got absolute shutdowns as well. A couple of Saturdays ago we had no trains at all. And this, like Mayor Brabin said, it's a case of it comes in our inbox and we are the ones picking up those pieces. So obviously we need to know that your resilience does go further than Preston. Thank you.
I agree wholeheartedly with all the comments made so far, but could we please have a more sensitivity and brevity on in-train announcements made on Avanti trains? A few years ago there was a government or a DfT directive on exactly this point, but it doesn't seem to have improved, and it's particularly adverse, I'm afraid, on Avanti, where the frequent repeated injunction to report anything suspicious. I'm afraid if people are listening to it at all, which I don't think most people are, it defaults very sadly to people taking more of anybody who may have mental health problems, or even worse, or if it could be worse, those perhaps who are from ethnic minorities. Now, I recognise that the accompanying pictorial campaign on the See It, Say It, Sort It is not devised by Avanti City. Nevertheless, very regrettably, it's clearly a black person who appears in these posters. And I don't know who's came up with this, but the whole thing put together puts, I'm afraid, Avanti in a very poor light, and is especially stressful for passengers who are tired, those of us in the north have had a day in London, we want a peaceful journey. Now, my experience of European travel is that they've got it exactly right. If you get an ICE train in Germany, it will say next to halt Bonn, or wherever it is, and all the other information is provided by other means. Why can't we get it right? It would help so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corran.
Thank you. I'm Sam Corcoran, leader of Cheshire East Council. I'm referring to paragraph 5.8 of the report, which refers to the second Liverpool service. Great. But then it says it's going to be diesel between Crewe and Liverpool as a consequence of restricted traction power supplies in the Crewe area. So I've got 3 questions. Can you tell us more about what's being done to fix those power supply problems in the Crewe area? Secondly, following on from what Councillor Gittins said, she asked about the drivers and the trains. You answered about the drivers. Can you tell us what trains you're going to be using? Are they going to be the 805s or the Voyagers? And where are those trains going to come from? And can we have a reassurance that there won't be any restrictions on the Crewe to Chester route as a result?
I might ask Rob McIntosh to deal with the traction and the PowerPoints from Network Rail just a little later on, and I'll restrict this particular area to just Avanti and what they're doing. Mayor Burnham, do you want to sum up now, or would you want Steve to come back and then you come separately?
Perhaps if Steve comes back, and then I could just finish off, Chair.
Okay, Steve, do you want to deal with the points you've got? Then I'll give the floor to Mayor Burnham.
In terms of the Liverpool services, obviously really important to us. We understand the demand, hence why we want it put up to 2 an hour. If we're not even providing that at this moment in time, we know the impact that has on the economy. It's huge. We are really concentrating on trying, as I said, you know, I do believe it will get better. I think we are moving forward with it. The 2 trains an hour will come when they're ready, and we'll say more about that, and Rob can update. So I do think there is a way forward with that, but we need to get the reliability into the 1 train an hour at the moment, never mind the 2 trains. And that's the first priority to us. While I'm picking up the point about the new trains and the point made by that councillor, these trains will be Hitachi trains that are already ordered, they're arriving, they're in the business at this moment in time. They're what they call bi-modes, which is a mix of diesel and electric. So obviously they'll run under electric when they've got overhead power, and then only in diesel mode for that short period of time. The challenge is north of Preston. For somebody who uses it north of Preston, yes, I can fully appreciate that. We have specifics, particularly in Scotland, again, and please, this is not to pass blame or anything like that, but we've got historical arrangements that allow people off and leave. We've seen an awful lot of leave getting taken on Saturdays in particular, which is an issue that everybody's seen in the last number of weeks. And that is heavily impacted, and hence why we were one day we had very, very few services between Preston and Scotland, which again is really difficult for people, particularly the leisure travel that we have on these routes. So really important that we get that sorted out again. It has been better in the last number of weeks, but again we've still got a lot of work to do with it. But we have got the rest day working coming back, which will help in that. The see it sorted message that was raised, that's an industry campaign that's run across every train operating company. It's specified by the Department for Transport and the British Transport Police that we work with. We can take on board comments and we can take that back, and we will do that and see whether we can look at it again. The announcements is a very interesting one. Some people want more announcements, some people want less. But there is key messages that we have to make on trains to ensure that passengers know the safety requirements, all these different things. I think, you know, we've talked about the global business issue. You know, again, you know, we understand fully where that sits. And we know that only running the services in a reliant way will make that problem go away for people. So hopefully I've covered most of the points that were there. If I haven't, please let me know.
Mayor Burnham.
Thank you, Chair. These issues could not be more serious for the Greater Manchester economy. And as you both know, your company has inflicted huge damage on our economy for coming up to 2 years now, since the timetable collapsed in August 2022. And all the things you said then, you're saying again today. And that explains why trust is very, very low. When Mr. Mellors came to our B Network committee in January, he pointed to improvement in the ORR data, and we were assured that services were improving. So I've got the ORR data for this is October to December. I think it came out on the 7th of March. Avanti, the worst operator across Great Britain in terms of right time. Is that correct? Worst operator in Britain. Just 37.2% of trains, right time. You were 46.3 in the previous quarter. And the Great Britain average is 62.2. Second worst operator in terms of reliability. Cancellations went up from 3.9 in the July to September quarter to 11.3 against the Great Britain total of 4.9. Is that correct as well? Those figures are right. However, the figures I've just quoted were based on the amended timetable that you sprung on us in December, where you removed trains. So actually, when you consider those removed trains, the cancellation figure is not 11.3, it was actually 18% loss of services. Again, that's right, yeah, that you would agree with those figures. And what I've heard today, again, is pointing here, there and everywhere, as others have said around this table. In the unions, this, and the weather, and this, that, and the other. The figure I've got for operator-owned cause cancellations is 7.4, and that had trebled since the previous quarter. So you have clearly got things wrong, and I want you to be direct with this committee this morning and tell us, what have you got wrong? What do you acknowledge you've got wrong, and what are you going to do to fix it? And we'll come to other questions, Chair, after.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Burnham. Clearly, the figures you're quoting, I'm not going to debate the figures that you're quoting there. We've already said to you, I don't think I've been trying to blame MD in this. It's a collective issue we have. I think we've been trying to explain it. We're trying to work with the wider industry.
My question was, what have you got wrong?
In terms of what have I got wrong?
You as a leader within this organisation and the organisation itself, what is your organisation taking responsibility for?
Well, we take responsibility for everything because it's our customers.
So what specifically then have you got wrong so that we can understand why you're performing so badly?
Well, the same as every other business, we have got challenges of different nature. Their challenge at the moment is...
You're bottom of the league. They're not bottom of the league.
Yeah, yeah.
You are. And you're bottom of the league on the most important railway line in the country. So can you see why we're concerned?
Understand it, yeah.
So what have you got wrong and what are you going to do to fix it? I want a very direct answer to that question.
Well, we've already started to tell you what we're trying to fix. You know, we're starting to rebuild relationships with the staff. We're trying to get Resty working back in. The figures you quote are not just AWC's figures, Advanti's problem alone, as in talk on self things. We have the infrastructure, we work with Rob's team, how we...
It's everything else, it's not you.
No,
I'm sorry, you're pointing to everything else, and I'm asking you what you as an organisation have got wrong. You are the company that were sending slides to a meeting of managers talking about free money and roll up. This says something is wrong with your culture of your organisation. As Tracy Brabin said before, when we called for TPE, that also was run by your organisation, we saw that with our own eyes around this table. When that organisation went from your control to OLR, a lot of things suddenly became apparent that weren't being done right, that now are being fixed. So I ask you again, what have you got wrong? Is it that you've got the relationship wrong with your own workforce, hence you have those industrial relations issues?
So the industry's got industrial relation issues. So not just AWC. So what have we got?
I'm not asking you as chair of Rail Delivery Group. I'm asking you. I'm asking you.
Yeah.
First, what have First got wrong? I want an answer to that question.
First Group has not done anything wrong. We have got a business. We
No,
have got
I'm
a
sorry.
business.
No.
We have got a business.
First
that we
Group have
got
not done
challenges.
anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Well.
Sorry, we just...
Well, no, sorry. I think you've said
Let me just
everything you
finish,
need to
please,
say
if you
because
don't
you're
mind.
in denial.
No,
You're not fixing these issues on the most important railway line in the country.
I run a large number of businesses.
And let Steve answer.
I run a large number of businesses in the UK. So they all run reasonably well. We've had problems with AWC and we've had problems with TransPennine. TransPennine is gone, it's happened. We can have the debate, you know, about why, what was right, what was wrong. We're trying to deal with the Advanti West Coast Challenge at this moment in time. We are trying to make sure that we build relationships with the trade unions, because that's where the challenge sits with us at this moment in time. It's a wider industry. We have got the AWC challenge. We are working with the trade unions to try and get the service stabilised.
But I heard this in August 2022. You told me exactly the same thing, sitting in my office. I didn't believe you then. Why should I believe you now? That all of these things are miraculously going to come right.
Because we have been sitting 2 years in national industrial relation problems. You know
So have other companies. Why are you bottom of the league then? Other companies have had those issues, but you're bottom of the league. Why?
Yeah. Well, I'm not totally responsible for the whole of that infrastructure, the whole of that route. We have, between Network Rail and ourselves, we have the challenges. We are working very closely with Network Rail. We've got good initiatives in place to try and improve right time. One of the examples is at Manchester Piccadilly, where we've had to change platforms. It's seen an 8% improvement in right time starts. So there's various things that we're doing. There's the day-to-day operational issues we need to get right and better.
I'm not reassured, and I will leave it there. And if others want to come in, I've heard enough to say to me that I have completely run out of patience, and I cannot accept this railway line being left in this perennial state of chaos. And it's too important to not just Greater Manchester, it's too important to the country for this to continue. So I'll leave it there, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I know we're very tight for time. Councillor Gittins just wants to come in.
Yeah, I agree with everything Andy said, and I think we should move to look at the options, and I'd like to propose option 2, because it feels like Groundhog Day to me. We've sat and had reassurances both on individual levels. I know our MPs have had the same reassurances, and nothing is moving. There is no responsibility either for the service, which is really quite distressing. So I'd like to propose that as a board we adopt option 2 in your papers, which is for the board to submit statutory advice to the Secretary of State for Transport that Advanti West Coast contract should be terminated at the earliest possible opportunity. So I'd like to propose that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a second. Okay, can I before I move to taking a vote, just Steve, to say thank you very much for coming this morning. And obviously you have heard the very, very deep concerns right across the board as far as the service is concerned. You know, you're in charge of it at the moment, and you know, I hope those improvements that you say will take place do take place, because it's frustrating for passengers, it's frustrating for the leaders of the authorities which you serve, and that's clearly come through today. And it also comes through as I think there is a growing recognition of the importance of Metro mayors to be voices for their areas, and what they're doing today is expressing what their electorate and their passengers and their businesses, more to the point, are actually feeling right across the pace. Councillor Swarbrick.
On the basis that you might need a seconder for the proposal, then I'd be very pleased to second the recommendation from Councillor Gittins.
Okay, fine. Well, I think we've probably had sufficient debate, and I will now take the vote. I think that is what I have to do, as it has been proposed and seconded from both vice chairs, representing Cheshire and Lancashire, and sort of a broad base right across the transport for the north. As I say, Steve, thank you very much, Andy, thank you very much for coming this morning. I do appreciate it. I know you're on a tight timetable and do have to leave, so thank you very much indeed.
Just check that the vote's carried.
Can I see an indication then of the motion, the option that has been put forward, which is option 2, which is on page 263 of the papers around. All those in favour?
I think you can say that's unanimous.
Okay, well, I feel that is a unanimous decision, and as a board we will have to transmit that to the Secretary of State. But thank you for taking the time this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you. Right. We've now... Thanks everybody for that. We've still got quite a lot to get through today and some important decisions to take. So the next item on the agenda is item number 5, which I'd like to deal with, and can I ask Katie to lead us on the strategic transport plan, please, that has been circulated for everybody to consider and has been in preparation for some time. Can I start by, Katie, thanking you and your team for all the work that has gone into the strategic transport plan, and invite you to say a few words, and then to, if people could indicate if they want to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to sort of put the thank you back out to members and to all of your officers. Because the journey over the last 18 months, if you'll excuse the pun, has been a huge one of gathering evidence, looking at data, engagement, talking to communities, talking to businesses, a huge amount of hard work. And I'm really pleased today to be presenting you with the STP for, I hope, approval and adoption. Subject to the board approving and adopting the strategic transport plan today, it will then be provided to the Secretary of State as our statutory advice to him on the strategic pan-regional transport needs and priorities for our region. Just a couple of points to flag. We have addressed through the amendments to the to the STP the steers that you gave us last September. That included, for example, additions around bus franchising and light rail and mass transit as well. And those are recapped in the paper for information. We've also, subsequent to your discussion at the December board, reflected the views and recommendations that the board took in relation to Network North and the cancellation of phases 2A and 2B of HS2. And we have just tightened the wording to reflect the board's existing position, ensure it was in line with that position about the description of Northern Powerhouse Rail in full. And specifically the wording that will now be in the document references including an underground station at Manchester Piccadilly, and grateful for colleagues at TFGM that have just been helping us work through that in line with the board's previously agreed position. It won't surprise you that in the days since we published the STP within the board papers, we have had some fresh eyes. I think I have looked at it too many times just to spot there are a few typos which our designers are currently dealing with. And I can assure you that those will be rectified before we publish the document on our website on Monday. From this point forward, the intention is that hopefully Patrick will be able to write tomorrow or Friday to the Secretary of State to provide that copy, and then we will publish on our website on Monday, and we expect to do some further engagement and communications after the PERDA period has come to an end. Could I just, in conclusion, just draw your eyes to recommendation D in the paper, which is around our monitoring and evaluation. We have created a monitoring and evaluation dashboard to help us look at all of the metrics that we've set across the strategic transport plan to allow us annually to say how are we doing, where are we, what needs to be different, what needs to be scaled up, scaled back. And we will use the existing Transport for the North business plan and our annual reporting arrangements to ensure that we capture that progress there. And we are working with your officers to hopefully drill down a little bit lower so we can provide some of that data at local authority level as well. And finally, as we talked about in December, our work continues around implementation advice, which is framed around actions and support TfN can provide to local transport authorities, developing a pan-regional investment pipeline. So as a board, you can be clear about what you want to be saying into future fiscal events, and also advice around ideas to remove inertia in the system and give greater certainty of funding. And something we've discussed previously is around the options about a Northern Appraisal Playbook to help us better make the case for investment in the North. We expect to bring that advice next back to you in June for further consideration and to take your steers. Otherwise, Chair, I will conclude my opening remarks there and ask the board for feedback and comments. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Right, got a number of people coming in. Can I first start with Councillor Gittings, please?
Thank you, Chair. It was a lovely read coming over from Liverpool today, and I felt quite uplifted at the end of it. So thank you very much for the whole of the team for the effort that's gone into it. And it's good that we're looking at the North as a whole, but also recognising place-based and how important that is. And it was great to see the impact of the lack of transport that has on our communities. So some really good information in there. I think it's great that we recognise the scale of the challenge. It's not going to change overnight, but having those short-term goals, I think, of what we need to do and to move at pace is really important. So I'm more than happy to support this today. So thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much. I'm Tom Hunt. I'm the leader of Sheffield City Council. I'm here on behalf of Oliver Coppard today, Mayor of South Yorkshire. Welcome the plan and particularly wanted to welcome the additional comments, supportive comments about tram train. Here in South Yorkshire, we have ambitions for expanding our super tram network, and we see tram train as central to that and central to meeting our Restoring Your Railways ambitions as well. Not only will it increase capacity for more fast trains through to Leeds, but it would also open up new development corridors, reduce the pressure on the M1 and help us with our air quality targets as well. So it's a welcome addition and it's something that I think Mayor Coppard would also endorse were he here today. So thank you for including that in today.
Mayor Bravin.
Thank you. I mean, I also support the work that you've done. It's incredible, and thank you for working so closely with our teams. I really do feel, obviously, this is for the future, isn't it? It's a strategic plan for the future. We need to also be mindful of what needs to happen in the here and now. At that T-shaped station at Leeds, we will not have a network across the north that is fit for purpose and will achieve all the ambitions from this plan without that T-shaped station. And you will know that we've written to the Prime Minister regarding the safeguarding land. So I suppose my question is not to yourself, because congratulations on the work, but also to the Chair and the Board. What are we doing in the here and now to make sure that those priorities are not that we don't let them slip through our fingers because we're looking to the future. And if I may, just additionally, there is a mention of car clubs, and while this might be niche, we do have car clubs in West Yorkshire that insurers are now no longer insuring car clubs, so this does feel slightly out of date now, and it's whether we need a conversation with insurers that if this is a way to help us get people out of their cars by sharing a car in a community, they can't do that if the insurers now no longer will underwrite that car club. But what are we doing about the here and now is also as important as the future.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Burnham.
Thank you, Chair. And congratulations, Katie, on your new position. We look forward to working with you in that role, but also on this as a piece of work, like everyone else has said. You know, we welcome it very, very strongly. I support what Mayor Bravin has just said about the T-shaped station for Leeds, but you will not all be taken aback to hear me say we would like a specific reference to the underground station at Manchester Piccadilly in relation to the line in the document around the new line from Liverpool to Manchester via Warrington and Manchester Airport. We, in the same way that Tracy believes that the T-shaped station here will build resilience into the whole northern system, we, as you know, have made the argument over many years now that an underground at Manchester will do exactly the same. So it is for our benefit, but it is also to the benefit of everybody around the table. And we hear more and more, even within the industry, that is supported. Actually, once the debate has moved on from HS2, I think there's growing support for what we've been arguing for a long period of time. Chair, could I just kind of make a suggestion as well, very quickly, which is kind of coming through the work I've done with Mayor Rotherham and Councillor Corcoran and others, as we've really sort of got into the guts of what it is to build a new railway between Liverpool and Manchester, and Councillor Gittins has been involved, and you know, others around this table have been involved. What is starting to come through is that a place-based approach to these things is a very different conversation. So we've been meeting with landowners, and you know, we've got an investment zone around Piccadilly now. Steve's got one around Lime Street. When you're talking about linking two investment zones in two big cities with the the players in that debate. You know, obviously we've got Justin from our business board today. You know, we have these conversations a lot now about how do you really mobilise a place-based approach to transport planning and railway planning, and the conversation is fundamentally different. It's about the infrastructure supporting what you want to achieve, rather than the infrastructure is the infrastructure, which was the HS2 debate. And I just wonder whether the document and the plan could helpfully pitch to what TfN could do that you wouldn't get at a national level, which is encouraging a more bottom-up, place-based approach to transport planning that involves all voices in the room, business voices, and other interests. And I already feel, and I don't know whether Claire's nodding as well, I think that is coming through with the different conversation that has begun in the Northwest about the Liverpool to Manchester line. And I think TfN should capture that and sort of say that that approach should underpin all of the ambitions that we have in this strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I certainly concur with that. I think if I can just refer back to what Mayor Bravin said as well, I mean, the here and now is very important. The trouble is with some of these projects, even the here and now ones, are a few years at least in the planning before they're actually properly developed. I mean, I was involved in opening the south side of Leeds station. I'd like to say I opened it. Well, I think I did open. I think I might have opened it, but it had been planned for a long time beforehand, and that has made quite a difference to where we are now and to this side of the station. And that, in a way, wasn't a small project because it was a very big project because it goes over the river. But that shows just how transformational the station areas are, and I think we've dealt with that partly in some of that other work, but particularly in our city centres. And I completely buy the point about both Leeds Station and Manchester Station. Leeds Station because of the congestion, and perhaps Rob, you might like to say something a bit later on around that particular point. But I don't think it's lost on what we're trying to do. I think but the strategic transport plan is to try and set the sights a bit further forward as well. Now, Councillor Rollo, I think.
Okay, so I'd like to support and the adoption of the STP. It's absolutely great that it recognises the challenges within rural accessibility. Our area is predominantly rural, and obviously people need the cars to move around, but it's the impact on social exclusion and trying to get people onto public transport, which is really important for us, and this does encompass that, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Equally, I would support the plan. I think this is a much more balanced document than when we first started, and is testament to the variety of views around the table, whether they be political or business. I'm gratified to see that there is a much greater emphasis on economics and economic growth and regeneration and placemaking, as the Mayor has just said, and also the recognition of rural areas, particularly because they encompass a large part of what this organisation covers as well. So I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I've got Justin Kelly. Justin, did you want to?
Yeah, just in support of Mayor Burnham's comments really about the underground station in Greater Manchester. For Manchester, whether you're within or you travel through, building that capacity. And I think, Chair, as you rightly say, looking to the future is of significant importance. And whether it's in our previous HS2 discussions or now post those, the swell of business support for that is really quite significant and fully endorsed, specifically referencing that within our plan, which is, as people have said, an outstanding piece of work.
Okay, thank you very much. Claire. Okay, thank you. I think I've got, Rob, are you? Oh, sorry. Let me take Rob first, if I might, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo the points about stations as places. I think that the railway too often has treated the stations as their own, as opposed to the stations belonging to the communities and economies that they serve. And we've seen over the decades how good investment in a station can be transformative for the economy around the towns and cities. That's why we've pushed hard over the last 5 years with the plans around Leeds, why I push hard with Susan and at Bradford and the new station for Bradford. That's why I've been in discussions with Mayor Burnham about what we need to do, and I too am coming to the conclusion that an underground station for Manchester is a meaningful way of resolving the significant issues that we face that in creating the services that we need. And of course I'm now spending more and more time with Crewe and getting to grips with the issues with Crewe. So I think the point in making and ensuring that stations are placemaking is absolutely essential for the plan.
Okay, I've got a couple more that want to come in. Councillor Hughes, Councillor Corcoran, and then Andy, I don't know if you just want to say anything as far as the department is concerned as well.
Thank
Sorry, Councillor Smith. Sorry, right.
Yeah. With reference to paragraph 5.4 and in the covering report and the issue of PERDA, I was under the impression that the local election PERDA had already begun. So I would like a brief explanation. Well, I was told.
Oh, told next week.
Okay, so obviously got it wrong, I'm afraid. So forget that one. But I'd like to add in, secondly, my own rural-based voice, because there's a reference to wider connectivity on page 3 of the executive summary of the SDP, and no doubt percolates the report. And whilst Councillor Rollo is correct that people do in rural areas do feel they have to have a vehicle, actually there are strenuous efforts, and TFN is not least amongst those, trying to bring about sufficiently good public transport, active travel, car clubs and so on, to ensure that this sense of absolute dependency is lessened, actually. And the Lake District National Park, for example, is making very determined efforts, working with local authorities, the sort of dying embers of the LEP and so on, to ensure that public transport is provided not just for local people who obviously, as TFN is aware, suffer a paucity of access, but also for, as I've said many times at these meetings, the millions of tourists who visit areas, particularly at the national park, indeed all rural areas, who have to get about and will continue. They say that they will use public transport once they arrive, but in fact they feel they have to come in their cars, partly because some of the issues we discussed with those who now vacated the chairs at the end, but actually having arrived in their own transport, it's so tempting just to carry on using it unless the local public transport and bike hire is extremely good. So I know that's covered in the report, but I'm just re-emphasising the point. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in support of the amendment here today, I just wanted to highlight sort of the benefits for this, for Blackpool being the premier holiday destination in the UK with 20 million visitors. We're going through a £2 billion regeneration programme, and first of May we opened the new Holiday Inn next to the train station with the integrated tram line going at Talbot Road from the promenade during May. The issue I have is really we need some more investment in the North train station. It's not the most sort of welcoming experience when you first come to Blackpool, so if we can sort of have support with that going forward would help, you know, because we like to, when people arrive to Blackpool, we like to make sure they get the experiences the best they can get.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corcoran and then Mayor Rotherham.
Thank you. The draft plan has been updated following the cancellation of HS2 and the announcement of Network North, but it doesn't portray the scale of the impact of this decision for Crewe and the distinct lack of any compensation to mitigate the damaging losses to the town, the borough, the council and the wider sub-region. The arrival of HS2 to Crewe would have added about £750 million a year to the town's economy and benefited some of the most deprived areas of the country, helping to tackle inequalities, which is a key theme of the plan. The cancellation of HS2 north of Birmingham has meant that the vital and long overdue investments at Crewe Station are to be shelved, along with the decade-long work by the Council, Network Rail and partners on the transformational economic and regeneration plans for Crewe. This means that Crewe is now heading on a journey of levelling down, not up, and the Network North proposals do nothing to change this trajectory. I was pleased to welcome the two gentlemen to my left to Crewe earlier this month to discuss the importance of Crewe as a regional rail hub to the northwest, where Mayor Burnham discussed the work to look at alternatives for improving rail connectivity between the West Midlands and Manchester. At the event, Mayor Burnham talked about his hope that any alternatives will see more services call at Crewe and not bypass Crewe, which would be a cheaper but short-sighted approach with consequences for much of Cheshire and the Potteries, as well as the West and Wales corridor within the plan. I welcome the support. I welcome and support the views of Mayor Burnham and ask that TfN endorses this message to ensure that Crewe continues to play a critical role in the future of rail and rail freight for the North Midlands and Wales. And speaking of freight, I note that the plan includes a section on rail freight with a modal shift from road to rail in line with the rail freight growth target set by central government at the end of last year. Crewe can play a vital role in this, which currently isn't recognised in the plan. Crewe is home to the Basford Hall freight yard, lying around a mile south of Crewe Station and a couple of miles from junction 16 of the M6. Basford Hall Freight Yard is one of the largest freight yards in the UK and Freightliner's largest rail operations. DB Cargo and DRS also operate from the site. The main use of the freight yard today is for the stabling and swapping of intermodal trains to allow goods to be moved across the country with only one change at Crewe. However, it has a history as a marshalling yard to transfer goods from rail to road and has the space and infrastructure to accommodate multimodal freight operations in the future and could provide a key facility for the North West and North Midlands. I note that the plan has identified the constraints for rail freight growth on the West Coast main line north of Crewe, between Crewe and Weaver Junction, but I believe that the plan should also identify the constraints that exist to the south of Crewe, as these will have a knock-on effect on freight movements in and out of the north. The Colwich to Crewe bottlenecks would have been removed by Phase 2A of HS2 by removing most fast long-distance passenger trains, leaving almost unlimited capacity for freight compared with today's 3 or 4 paths per hour. As with the Crewe to Weaver Junction constraint, the slower running HS2 trains through this section may actually reduce freight paths from today's level. Again, this demonstrates the need for a comprehensive and holistic solution for Crewe in the absence of HS2, and the need for this to be embedded within any alternative north-south connectivity enhancements being considered. So, I would welcome TfN's endorsement of the need for capacity improvement through Crewe and a package for Crewe Station. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. I think you hit on a number of important points that are a result of the cancellation of HS2 up to Crewe without any doubt, and capacity was one of the biggest issues, although it was never really portrayed that way because everybody got carried away with HS2 being high speed. Capacity was always the reason for it.
Chair, sorry, just very briefly, the private sector working group established by the Mayor of the West Midlands and myself made an interim statement yesterday, and it's just whether you, when the discussion, if you wanted me to provide a very brief update on that, because it is relevant to the plan actually. And anyway, just so you know.
Look, go ahead, Andy. I want to finish this by about 12.
Sure, I'll keep it very quick then, but it is to speak really in support of what Councillor Corcoran has just said. The work has very clearly shown that the whole of the north of England, mainly the northwest, but whole of the North, as Tracy made clear before in our earlier discussions, would be heavily impacted if we try and rely on the West Coast Main Line and the M6 for our connectivity in the rest of this century. I am told it will be full, the West Coast Main Line, in the 2030s. Now, you can argue at what point is it saturated, but I don't think there's any debate that it would be saturated in the 2030s, and of course we would end up with fewer seats and slower trains, which really isn't anything we can really countenance. So the interim work was sort of announced yesterday. The private sector working group led by Arup, Mace and others has concluded that a new line is the best solution between Handsacre and High Lee. So bear in mind, this would become a very missing piece of a railway jigsaw, wouldn't it, if nothing changes from where we are right now. It's actually all overground, I think. I don't think any of it has to be tunnelled, or very small parts, so it's not the most expensive line in the country. Andy Street and I are not arguing for HS2, just to be clear. This has got to be son or daughter of HS2. It's not the same thing. But I just would want to make clear today that any new line should go via Crewe, with a bypass into Crewe or through Crewe. Whatever way it is, I just want to show that should be our position. And my reason for intervening, now that we're hearing what that group is saying, I do think Katie should try and capture that into the plan, because if it's not reflected in the plan, all of our grand ambitions for railways in the north and transport in the north would be severely impacted by that bottleneck south to Birmingham.
Okay, I want to reflect a little bit on that, because I think that is very important. Let's just reflect on it for a second, but let's not hold up endorsing the plan, but we may want to sort of add something to it, or an addendum to it, or something like that. I'm slightly looking at the time now. Mayor Rotherham.
Okay, soft boil egg time, right. Start the timer. Look, people don't really understand the fragmented nature of our rail system. So, for instance, it was really interesting to hear Rob talking about ownership of railways, of rail stations, because in the Liverpool City region, we get a lot of the stick, as you can imagine, but we don't have ownership, even though some of them we've improved, some of them we've even built recently, and we don't own them. And I describe it, it's like, for me, jumping over next door's fence and going in and decorating their house, because it's never ever going to be ours, but that's what we're doing. It's somebody else's asset, and we're improving it. So we've entered into a memorandum of understanding, and hopefully with department, to try to see whether we can take them over. The reason being is because we can access things currently that Network Rail couldn't, or the department couldn't. So, for instance, private investment. So we could have a public-private sector partnership to invest. We could get perhaps coffee chains or concessions, retail outlets, or whatever it is, on the assets, so that we can get some return on it. So it wouldn't all just be public money, but there are ways in which we can model things slightly differently than that available currently in the system that we have. And that's why I think they should be community assets, our train stations. And the one thing that we haven't mentioned, which we always try to touch on, is accessibility. The only way in which we're going to improve accessibility for people is to have that investment, and that means then, of course, we're going to have to find a different way, because on the current trajectory, even on the Merseyrail stations, if we didn't have a significant intervention, it's going to take us about 15 to 20 years to get 100% of our rail stations accessible. That is no good to anybody. I've committed that they will be, by the end of this decade, 100% fully accessible in the Liverpool City region. That will be the first area in the whole country that will be able to achieve that target. But we can only do it by taking the asset and then seeing whether we can sweat that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to give full support to this strategic document. I guess I'm already kind of looking forward to a revision of the document, in the sense that I feel that smart technology has not been looked at, and I really think, particularly with the development of AI, that there are real opportunities here, for traffic management,
to manage air pollution, giving bus priority. I just think we're not looking at that at the moment. I raised that as an area that I do think we should kind of look at.
You're against the clock. I'd just say I think it's been a mammoth effort. I fully commend the engagement that we've had from Katie and team on it. It is Transport for the North statutory advice, and we'll be very happy to put it to ministers.
Okay, thank you. Rob, did you just want to come? You indicated a bit earlier on, sorry, but if you just wanted to go.
No, I covered my points when I spoke earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, Katie, do you just want to sum up before I take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your support and thank you for all the feedback. There were three phrases that we used in writing this plan, and that was outcome-focused, place-based and user-centric. And actually, it's so refreshing to talk about transport as an enabler and not a means to an end. It's not a cost centre. Connectivity, along with other policy levers, are what is going to give us GVA growth, reduce social exclusion and decarbonise our environment. In response, I think just the specific points around crew, most helpful. It would be really useful, Councillor, to have a copy of your statement, because I think there are a lot of elements within there that we can pull into the more detailed implementation advice. What we have got in the plan at the moment is recognising exactly that HS2 may not be the policy option anymore, but we still need the connectivity and capacity. And we have very clearly set out in the plan that our evidence says we still need that connectivity and capacity that would have been provided by phase 2A, phase 2B, and we need alternative proposals to that. So we've got that in the plan on page 75. Similarly, we have also specified in the plan on the back of the board's conversation that was had in December that we also needed alternative options to catalyse the economic potential of Crewe and its immediate area as well. Very much speaking to the point you've made. And I think if it would be helpful, we could make a minor amendment to that bullet point to specifically talk about the capacity and connectivity south of Crewe. If that would be amenable to the board, I would suggest to just strengthen that. But I think your points about freight are most welcome, and I think it would be useful to have a conversation with your officers offline around some of those details, because we're in the process of working up advice around what we need to do around that shift from road to rail. And actually, one of the things this board said to us in September was to be more ambitious on that, which we have baked into the plan. And I think if we've got some very specific examples of where we could do that with development around freight yards, I've been talking directly to some of the freight operators myself. I think we can build a stronger case for why investment is needed. So I'd like to make that offer and follow up that specific line of inquiry, Councillor Corker, if that's acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. I think what I'd like to do now is to ask for the endorsement of the plan. We need a majority vote, a super majority vote on this. I haven't heard anybody speaking against it. Can I have an indication of all those in favour, please? Julie, is that sufficient?
Yes,
Thank you. Before Martin, can I just say, look, I found that a very constructive debate as to the way forward. What we've now got to do is to carry on with the implementation of this, not just sort of adapt the plan, but actually take on board some of the issues and work on the implementation and setting ourselves some particular targets to check our matching up to it. But that's the important part. Martin.
Chair, it was just too specific. I wanted just to respond to Mayor Braben's specific point about the T station. If you remember, at the December meeting, we had that overarching report about transforming the north, and we identified things like the need to address the capacity at Piccadilly Station, Leeds Station, the capacity across the Pennon. Just to reassure Mayor Braben and the board, those are pan-regional priorities, and that's our touchstone that we're now driving into our conversations with the sponsorship board at DFT, and I know that we're working together to make that the case. So I just wanted to reassure, address that specific point that Mayor Braben had picked up, and also just to reassure back on the point that Katie's made about working on place-based. We've got a really strong relationship at a regional level with DLUC. It's something that they see the knowledge and the experience and the tools that we've got at TFN, and it's been a really encouraging conversation that actually talks to what a lot of the elected members have been talking about today.
Chair, would you mind if I just ask for a point of clarification? I heard what Katie said about north-south connectivity and the points about Crewe and the need for that capacity. which is welcome, but that is quite a broad statement, and I was just wondering whether or not something more immediate is needed, because the plan won't be realised if the land is sold off, for instance, on that alignment. And I don't know whether the mood of the board would be just to, put wording in about the steps that need to be taken to realise that the ambition is good, but it's quite a hard job right now to keep this alive. The private sector working group is keeping it alive, and I think it's important that this board would say something slightly more specific. I think Crew might find it helpful, but I think we would find it more helpful if the plan was more explicit about the importance of, a new line or extra capacity on the Handsacre to High Lee, because it's such a we are all in trouble if that land gets sold, and it's quite a critical issue, I would say.
I think we did endorse that, so I'm happy to be working with you and the group concerned to make sure that we reflect that in what we say. Is that, yeah? Okay.
Chair, if I may add as well, we'll take that away and make the adjustments. I think it's a really good point, Mayor Burnham. We have also captured in the plan the need to safeguard the land as well. That is in the plan. We've put, until there are alternative proposals, the safeguarding associated with HS2 should remain in place and only be lifted where there is agreement with the relevant local transport authorities. Does that address your point, Mayor Burnham?
It does not. Sorry, I missed it. That's stronger.
As I said, I can't see the wood for the trees myself with it anymore, so it's fine. Thank you for your support.
Okay. Claire, you want to come in?
Chair, if I might respond, I think in terms of the strategy, the strategic transport plan, I think we've got the direction of travel and the ambition and the outcomes defined. What we need to do is, as Katie said, work with you and the outputs from the Convention of the North to make sure the implementation advice, the priorities feeding into fiscal events like a spending review that's going to be coming, making sure those are reflected and picking up on the outcomes from those workshops.
Okay, fine, thank you. Can we then move to item number 6, please? And Paul, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Gittins, I hope your joy of reading the STP was mirrored in the reading of the accounts. The approval of the accounts is a matter reserved to the board, and the detail behind them is in the covering paper, and hopefully everyone is comfortable with that. The accounts, as they are presented, have been cleared by the external auditors with the anticipation of issuing a clear audit report tomorrow, and they were presented and reviewed to the Audit and Governance Committee. So, happy to take any questions in relation to the approval of the accounts.
Are there any questions? If not, can I ask for approval? Sorry, Councillor Hughes.
Yes, Chair. This refers to the annual governance statement, which is part of the account. It starts on page 195, and in the second to last paragraph on that page, there's a reference to TFN Scrutiny Committee decision. Now, my understanding is that scrutiny get regular updates on board matters, but we don't, conversely, hear much about what scrutiny is doing. And it may be said that as a lot of it is pre-scrutiny of board business anyway, then that just feeds into the reports. But it might be useful. I mean, Martin wants to respond.
So Chair, as TFN, we operate a policy of scrutiny first, so board papers are taken through scrutiny committee, and in the final preparation of the board, you get the comments of the scrutiny committee are fed into the boards, in the final board papers, and you have the chair of the scrutiny committee appears before you once a year to give you reassurance that the work that they have been doing is in good order, and you can be confident in the process we're following.
Can I then ask for approval of the accounts 2023, please? Yeah. All in favour? Thank you. Moving on, Martin, to budget and business plan.
Chair, again, as this is the March meeting, we're asking we present to you both the budget and the associated business plan for the year ahead. The papers are there for you. In terms of the budget, we have the second year of a 2-year settlement from the department, so we know the budget we're working within, which makes it a little bit easier this year. And the budget has been set. You've also got set out within that how, as part of that, we will use some of the reserves whilst maintaining the agreed minimum reserve level moving forward. It also sets out how we look forward for the next 3 years, and will be a conversation with the department moving forward about subsequent years, but we're clear about what we need. And in terms of the business plan itself, you'll see some themes like we're going to get onto the buses item in a very clear expression about the importance of buses and the need for us to be doing more as TFN to support the work at the city, region and local level about that. You'll see there's focus again around the TFN offer, developing that package of measures to support partners. And I think, Katie, when we last talked, had something like about 40 requests from your officers in various ways to draw on the knowledge and experience that we've got. Where we can, we will meet them, but where we need to have a conversation with the department, we may well be saying we need to be able to have further resources to be able to help that. So you have a budget which is within the agreed limits identified by the Secretary of State. You have the supporting business plan, and they're both presented to you for your consideration and approval, along with the matters around the use of the reserves as part of that budget process.
Braven?
Thank you so much, Chair. I know this is obviously it's difficult to draw together. There's just one question. I've had a number of conversations, as you can imagine, with my local authority leaders about the transport levy, about the challenge facing our local authorities after decades of cuts. And to see the funding increase from core grant funding from 7.2 million to 9.3 million for each of the subsequent years. I suppose the question is, one, how is the gap going to be filled? But also, can I go back to my local authorities and say that this is the money that is going to be used to make the case for Bradford, for the T-shaped station in Leeds? And what conversations have you been having to sort of ensure that that money is allocated and will be put to good use for all of our members on this board? And just secondly, the analytical support, the budget for 5.7 million. You've obviously mentioned that MCAs and local authorities come to you for evidence, and you know it's one of the jewels in the crown of TFN is the analysis. But given that Northern Powerhouse Rail has stalled, it would be interesting to be able to make the case to my local authority partners exactly what are you analysing.
So if I may pick up on all of those points. So what you have in terms of the 3-year budget, or the financial, we have the budget agreed with the department for the new year coming 24-25. Subsequent years, that is the basis on which we are proposing to plan, and we need to have a conversation with the department because that will be part of the new spending review conversation. So it is us very much setting out what we believe we need from government to support the activities of TFN, which, if we remember, are devolved responsibilities from the department. So it's about getting that funding from the department. But that is a conversation we need to have with the department as part of the spending review input. So it will be over the course of the summer. What we're just setting out is here what we need to be, from our perspective, to be able to deliver the services. And to reassure you, Mayor Brabin, absolutely, because things like the T station at Leeds, the underground station at Manchester, the other pieces of infrastructure we've talked about, because those are TFN priorities, the funding that we receive from the department, we are using that to reflect the priorities that you agree as a board. That is the devolved responsibility to you as the TFN board. On the issue about the analytical capability, that, if I remember, Paul, that's the funding that we deal with in work commission from the DFT directly, isn't it? So that's work that the DFT team are asking us to do around the Northern Powerhouse business case, where we are potentially working with individual authorities. And I know I've had a conversation with your chief executive about how we can help support the work you want to do in and around West Yorkshire, particularly around things like Bradford Station and the T-shaped station. That would be a separate conversation that we're having in addition to it would be separate from that money that's identified in there about analysis.
Claire?
On that, thank you. When we're looking at the Northern Evidence Network and really thinking about how we're working together between MP11 and Transport for the North, it's critical that we bring all of that data together. So it's looking at the dashboard for economic growth and data, which we can then analyse both at a northern level and at a regional level. So the relationships between Transport for the North and MP11 actually is continuing to enhance, I think. So we are having conversations at the moment about how do we work together to make sure that that is a synergistic, I think is the word that was used from last week. So so just to reinforce that importance of having clarity around what it is we're trying to achieve and also current state of the economy.
Okay, thank you. Can we have approval then, please, for the budget and business plan? All those in favour? Thank you. Can we then move on to the corporate risk register? Paul, is there anything you want to say about this, or should we just take it as read? Any questions? Councillor Hughes?
Yes, Chair, I'm referring to page 240. My question really relates to any possible future for HS2. I'm sort of looking at, in considering new risks that may emerge for TFN, particularly in this instance, but for lots of other organisations as well. We passed a motion at this board not so long ago, which we agreed, I think possibly unanimously, or certainly very strongly, that that the original HS2 project should be built in full. Now, there may be others in the room who have more insight into what an incoming government might intend to do about HS2, but my question really is just, is TFN fully prepared? We talked about safeguarding of land already. Is TFN fully prepared for the implications of a resurrection of HS2, either at least the phase to Crewe, or indeed possibly including the eastern leg as well?
This is a bit of an existential question, actually, because on the risk register, I think it's important that we've had conversations about the changing landscape of transport and the role of GB Rail. And in item 11, later in the agenda, it's referenced that the pre-bill scrutiny, there's no reference to TFN. So surely one of the biggest challenges and risks to the organisation is the original purpose of the body becoming redundant, when you're seeing greater relationships on a place-based, as you've heard earlier, whether that's bus franchising, whether that is relationship building and working together with the private sector, with GB Rail. We want that very intimate relationship with GB Rail as mayors. So is that not actually quite an important risk to have on your register?
Well, I think we are coming on to that. I mean, it is only a draft bill, and it's fair to say it's very draft. That is an issue where we are making some submissions. As
Chair,
far
sorry,
as
could I have a TFN officer
just 1 second, sorry, just 1 second, which we will come on to when we get to that part of the consultation on that particular bill. Councillor Hughes and then Mayor Burnham.
Could I have a specific TFN officer response to my question, please, about HS2? Thank you.
I'll do that. I'll ask Martin to deal with that. Mayor Burnham first.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to follow quickly on Mayor Brabin's point. I think it is important to recognise, as we start to change transport in our city regions, and where we have ambitions around the rail network in our regions, that the role of this organisation might change. And I think, I again, it may well be picked up in all of the papers, but I would say, though, and I think this is important to say, that if this organisation had not been in existence, I don't think we would have kept guards on trains, got Northern under operator of last resort, TP under operator of last resort, and saved ticket offices. I think, without us having a space like this to do some of the things that we've done, including today, I think it's really important to recognise that, and I think it is important though to recognise that, but transport in the north is changing. So it's kind of how the corporate risk register kind of picks all of that up. It's a complicated thing. I think the role of this organisation in the future might be more to adjudicate and work with two city regions, as Steve and I, for instance, when some of these issues that we're starting to unpack now with railways, as they come into a more devolved context, or or one of our outlying areas doesn't like, that seems to become an issue. So it's how do you anticipate that landscape? It's very uncertain, but I sitting here today, that's how I see this playing out in the next decade. And it's a very different role to the one it's been. It has been advocacy, and I think it will change in the next decade. It's just how you pick that up.
I fully concur. I think that's a wider debate, but my own personal view is I fully concur with that. I think I've mentioned it to you before, Mayor Burnham. I remember when the Mayor of London wanted to extend his services into Kent and take control of that. It was actually Kent MPs who were very much against, because they'd have no say or no direct relationship with the Mayor of London, even though it was then a Conservative mayor. It still meant that they wanted that area of adjudicator, which may be the sort of, and that's one of the reasons why there is certain mentions in the bill to TfL, but not beyond that, and that's why I think we should be thinking about how that is reflected as far as the bill is concerned. Martin, do you just want to answer Councillor Hughes' point, please?
If I might, I'll just pick up on Councillor Hughes, but also Mayor Braben, and pick up on following on from Mayor Burnham as well. I think in the corporate risk register, there is an explicit reference there about monitoring, with the approach of the general election, monitoring the political environment, particularly in that context of the general election and the implications for TFN's objectives. I would like to think the risk register is capped at. I think I would make the observation, Mayor Burnham made reference to some of the things. I think a more recent conversation we had involved our colleagues from the North East, where this board came together and actually said the link from Newcastle to Manchester and the TPE services was really important, and that was a voice that came from the whole of the North. So I think that kind of pan-regional perspective is one that plays part. I would like to think in the nearly 3 years that I've been in this role, I would like to feel that TFN has evolved, reflecting the evolution and the growth and the role of the Metro Mayors, and I would like to think through the process we do with you on the business planning, we reflect the priorities of you as a board. And those priorities, if I look back to when I joined, to when I look at the year ahead, are very different. You're talking about some of that big picture stuff, the evidence, some of the supporting work, some of the more bigger picture, the work that complements and supports the work of the individual authorities, as well as being that arena where you come together on those particular issues. So I would say we're very much aware of those risks that's been picked up by Councillor Hughes. I think the point about Mayor Braben and Mayor Burnham have both picked up about it's a continuing evolution process I'm very aware of and very alert to, and I will want to work with the board over the coming year to make sure that we do stay focused on what's relevant for you at a pan-regional level that supports and complements what's being done at the city region level.
Okay, so can I have agreement for the corporate register then, please? Thank you. Right, Julie, corporate governance update.
Take it as right.
Can we...
I think this. Chair, just a very quick point. In our governance structure, obviously, there's we did change things so that there was representation from trade unions, if you remember, some time back, and we haven't had a huge attendance from the trade unions. Perhaps, given especially what happened today, when we've had some of the train operating companies top brass here, perhaps we should offer that as well to the union, so we could ask some general secretaries to come in and answer some of the allegations and questions that we've got.
The importance of the business voice, particularly now as most of the LEPs are changing their structures by the end of March. So it's a fairly significant shift in landscape, so it's good to see you here, and continue to make sure that we're engaging with the business advisory boards. If we can make that slightly more explicit in some of the governance as well, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We'll do that. Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, just on paragraph 4.2, Chair, it's specific to the instance of the emerging North Yorkshire Combined Authority. I wasn't absolutely clear whether the recommendation here is that until the election of a mayor for the Combined Authority, that there will still be one representative from the City of York and one representative from the North Yorkshire Unitary Authority. Is that correct?
Just to clarify, Chair, the authority is already in place and therefore there is one representative from here today. It's not the Mayor because obviously the mayoral election hasn't taken place yet, but the authority will be able to choose its representative once that's happened.
So it's not, Chair, that isn't exactly what it appears to say in the report. It says representatives will continue to be sent from the extant authorities.
Not from the extant committees for North Yorkshire. There's one representative today, Chair.
One representative, and that's a permanent fixture now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I can't see you right down there.
Waving away down here.
Sorry.
Yeah, just as that representative from the Combined Authority, that in the report you'll see that has been extant for some time now, from December last year. I think that's fairly clear in New York. Obviously, we have got mayoral elections on the 2nd of May, and we'll see what happens after that, but I'm the representative for York and North Yorkshire as it stands until then.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thank you. Just picking up on Claire's point about the importance of the business voice around this table. We have previously talked about co-opting business advisory bodies on to form a contribution to this, whether that's IOD or CBI or whatever. And I just wonder whether that is something that could be reviewed, given the landscape around LEPS, and we're not quite sure where that landscape is going to end up.
Katie?
Thank you. One of the things we've sought to do over the last 6 months is really step up the business engagement, and I'm really pleased that we have re-engaged with a lot of those business representative bodies. So in addition to making sure we've got sort of a continuity with the LEPS coming to an end to ensure the business voice is protected around this board, the other aspect that we're going to take a look at as executive is how we can do some further business engagement, whether it's directly to those business bodies, picking up the trade union representation we've got on our partnership board as well, and also thinking about some of the direct engagement, dare I say it, with transport providers, freight operators. We're just scoping out those plans, so perhaps the board might be amenable to me bringing an update to you in June, because I think that we can see how some of that engagement goes. And then maybe, as we were suggesting in the paper, when we review arrangements next year, given the kind of post-son-daughter of LEP arrangements are still formulating, to put some recommendations about how we might further strengthen business representation, if appropriate, around this board.
I'm very keen to do that. From the airports right across the region to the logistics industries to the ports, there's a lot of industries that are involved, and also perhaps talking to them about what they're doing as far as investment in the area and apprenticeships and the like. There's a heck of a lot we can positively do as a TFN right across the piece, and be a voice for them where we can be, where it can, agrees with what we want to see happen. Councillor Mumby.
Yeah, partly a bit made answer what I was trying to say, because I thought we need to formalise what we're going to try and do with businesses and make sure we've got a formal way of going forward and being inclusive we possibly can, to make sure we get a business voice here and understanding, because we're on about transportation for passengers and the economic growth of our areas. I think we can't miss out businesses in that conversation, so that should be in there, but probably put a formal piece of work together to make sure we're including everyone we possibly can, and make sure the voice is actually gets a seat at this table, to make sure we have to take all the views going forward and ensure that we get the business's voice here with us.
Yeah, something I'm certainly very keen for us to develop. Right, so that's the governance update, and I think we've dealt with that. I don't think that needs a vote, does it?
Well, it just needs to be confirmed.
Is everybody content? Thank you very much indeed. Right, finally, item number 10. Stephen, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Emma Ward said you'd come to our next board meeting to talk about buses. Incredibly important. a lot of people around here have led the way in their bus services and trying to bring changes. Andy with the B line, Steve with what he's already doing in Merseyside. Tracy made a announcement a few days ago about her desire to move forward, and I know Oliver Coppard has done the same. Sometimes we do, there's no sometimes about it, we sometimes do get bogged down with railways, but actually every single day buses fulfil an incredibly important role as far as mobility for the people within the north. That's so very important. So Stephen, you've submitted, you've done some slides which I think are people sent them a few days ago, but would you like to take us through them and address some of the points, and then we'll have a bit of an open discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the invite. I'm really sort of pleased to be here, both to give a bit of an overview, but actually then to have the conversation and the discussion, and to very much hear your priorities and your perspectives for the work that we're doing in DFT, and where you see our role sort of fitting in going forward, and where we can help, and where perhaps we might be hindering as well. So very keen to have that conversation and build on the discussions we've been having with many of your officers. For those who I don't know, I've been involved in buses and development going back about 8-9 years or so now. I first got involved quite heavily at the point of developing the Bus Services Act, which I sort of oversaw as a Deputy Director. I remember fondly working very, very closely with Mike Renshaw and colleagues in Manchester on how do we develop some franchising powers that might actually work in practice. And I'm sure there's some things we got right there, and there are some things we didn't quite get right, and I'm sure some of that will come out in the conversation. But I think looking back over that time, and actually my career in DFT more widely, I don't think I've ever seen a time when buses have had that prominent chair that you're talking about in terms of their importance in the way DFT approaches policy and funding. And I think there are two aspects to that. I mean, one is really good news, which is that recognition of this being the most used form of public transport, the sheer importance to communities and the sheer importance to local economies. But I think the flip side of that is the scale of the challenge in the bus market and in the wider context at the moment. And I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with this, but it might just be worth sort of sharing the national statistics, which I know vary hugely on a local basis by authority and operator. But nationally, we are looking at about 90% of pre-COVID patronage on buses, but that's predominantly a loss of concessionary patronage. We're about 60 to 65% of concessionary patronage, and nationally, we are latest statistics I saw, which are estimates, we're up at about 98% of fare-paying passengers. The fare-paying recovery is there, but this is all on a service base, which again, on an England outside London basis, is about 80% of what it was pre-COVID. So we've now got the same level of service, and we've got the same level of fare-paying passengers, but not those concessionary passengers around. And I'm really conscious that, whatever I pick up today and whatever we're doing in DFT, there are some really harsh realities out there for some people using bus services, for communities that have not got services they had a while ago, for frequencies that are reduced, and driver shortage challenges and others. But I thought it might just be helpful to sort of give some sort of overview of the funding position and a few perhaps edited highlights of some of the things we are and have been working on. So if I just sort of briefly take you to slide 2, which is the first chart in the slides. I thought it might just be helpful to share with you the sort of funding DFT has put into bus services in the north since 2019 when I started this role. And I think if somebody told me the right-hand chart would look like it did now, I probably wouldn't have believed them back then. And I think that does reflect the times we have been through. And it doesn't tell the whole story either. So this excludes the kind of capital funding that goes in through CRSTS. It excludes zero-emission bus funding. And of course, it doesn't capture any of the money that flows through DLUC. I know that's a challenging context for many authorities. But when you sort of look at the first year versus the budget for next year, particularly post the money we allocated from HS2, we are looking comfortably at more than a tenfold increase in the kind of level of funding that's being provided. And then I thought it might be helpful to be sort of really, really transparent in terms of how some of this money, particularly on bus service improvement, divided up between some of the regions in the country. So if you move on to the third slide, this is just specifically the money for bus service improvement plans, the one headed BSIP totals. And those 3 bars give you the kind of 3 phases of that money. So the blue bar is that first chunk of money that was allocated on a competitive basis over 5 years. And I'm really conscious that had winners and losers, and I think particularly at South Yorkshire and others who didn't come out well from that process. And then the next two bars are the sort of emergency, if you like, sort of service support for 2 years, which is the orange one, and then the money we allocated from Network North, which is just the first year of a 780 million total for the North in the grey bar. And hopefully what you can see there is what we've tried to do is reflect what we learned from the first round in that, and to have a formula that sort of reflected the need. So those last two rounds have been formula-based. They've been based initially on a combination of tendered service need, and by the time we got to the grey bar, predominantly on population. And increasingly, as you go through that, higher percentages of the money are going to the North as we work through. And if you add it all up, I think I'm right in saying that sort of per head of population, even excluding the CRSTS money, we are putting more money into the North than any other part of the country in terms of funding for bus services. And then the last two slides are really just kind of giving you a bit of a potted highlights of some of the things we've been working on. I think some of the stuff that people perhaps don't see from the National Bus Strategy is the stuff that isn't the big money. It's some of the smaller things that actually for me are as important, if not more important. The first point on the slide there, I think, brings home the core of the National Bus Strategy for me, which is really about saying we don't want a world where bus operators are running services without working with local authorities, without reflecting the needs of communities. And everything I had ever seen, and I think the department had seen, suggested that buses work best where there was a shared agenda between the operators and the local authority, and everybody's working for the same benefit. And that's ultimately, if the National Bus Strategy is about one thing, it is about that. And I'm just delighted that every authority in this room has either enhanced partnership or is pursuing franchising and using one of those two models to drive that. And one of the things we did that went a bit under the radar, I think, is we invested in at least one additional officer in every authority to broker that partnership, to do the things that didn't necessarily cost money, about timetables, fares, customer charters, making sure the right conversations about where buses are held up are happening between the operator and the highways team, and so on. I also wanted to highlight some of the work we're doing on journey experience, and that's a whole range of that, particularly for inclusion and accessibility with people with those accessibility needs. We have brought in the audio-visual regulations, which kick in from October, and over the course of the next 2 years, we will be expecting audio-visual announcements to roll out on all buses that don't currently have them. We're dealing with some of those softer experiences, or at least attempting to, of people with perhaps those hidden disabilities or those passengers who have got their heads buried with marketing campaigns. And we have a picture there from our It's Everyone's Journey campaign, which we're just doing another burst now, actually focused on Leeds and focused on Newcastle. I thought I'd mention briefly the rural context, which has come up a few times already today. One of the other pieces of work that we've got going on is what we call the Rural Mobility Fund, which is 16 authorities working with us across a £20 million programme to try out different ways of doing demand-responsive transport and try and find the best, most cost-effective ways of providing a better set of rural connectivity that really meets people's needs, whether that's more likely to be tendered, but doing that in a commercial kind of way. And that's about learning and trying to drive change. A couple of other things I'll just mention on this one. The first is around concessionary fares, where we have sought, given that difference in patronage and some of the inflationary pressures in the sector, to reset that guidance to make that sustainable as best we can. And I'm conscious there's some challenges for authorities there, but to reflect the real cost of concessionary patronage and the real opportunity. And also just running communications campaigns to try and get some of those concessionary fares patronage back, recognising actually the benefits for social care bills and other authority duties and town centres of getting people to use the bus fast if they're able to do so, bring. And of course the £2 fare cap, where I'm conscious of some of the concerns of the way we've done that in Manchester and in West Yorkshire, but the intention there was very much to fund those places that had not already been funded for a £2 fare cap through the BSIP programme. And then just to conclude, if I may, Chair, with the last slide, with just a few of the things we've got coming up. These are generally things we mentioned in the National Bus Strategy and haven't quite come to fruition yet. That's a combination of needing to do various things on funding that I think nobody of us envisaged we would need to do at the point at which we did the bus strategy. So things took a little bit longer as we've had to divert teams into doing that, and things like the £2 fare. But I'm hoping we will be announcing fairly soon the next round of zero-emission bus funding for zero-emission bus regional areas. That is very deliberately designed to prioritise where we can zero emission buses in a rural context, and also places that have not already had that funding, so we get more of the charging infrastructure out to make it more commercially viable. We are hoping to revise the franchising guidance. I don't expect that to be an absolute fundamental change, but I expect it where we can to pick up some of the really helpful guidance and advice we've had from colleagues, particularly in Manchester and Liverpool City region, about what would have been useful to be clearer and might have made the process easier within the current legislation. And we are continuing to work on concessionary fares and a wider review on that in terms of eligibility, service hours and so on. And I'll probably conclude really by just mentioning BSOG reform. So that's our core grant that goes, it's about £260 million a year, predominantly to operators, but also to some local authorities, and is already devolved in Greater Manchester amongst other places. And we're going to hopefully in the next few months consult on that. And there's some really interesting key issues in there I think will be of interest to a lot of people, including how do we approach devolution, to what extent do we devolve that funding down, in what kind of circumstances, including how we calculate it, to move away from a fuel duty basis or a fuel basis. Do we move to distance? Are there different models? And there are differential impacts of that on rural and urban services. So a whole bunch of choices there coming up in that space. And I think just to end, I'm conscious none of this necessarily changes the reality of people, and I'm really interested if there are other levers you think we could or should be pulling, or this combination of things aren't quite working from where you are. I think we are trying to pull the levers we've got in DFT, but would really welcome your views and your thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Kirsten, do you want to, you're our lead on buses, is there anything you want to add to the work you're doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Yes, thank you for Stephen for that update. Just to let you all know, in TFM we're doing quite a lot in buses. So we're developing a public transport model that covers buses and light rail, and that sort of sets out the evidence base that you can use for your business cases and to inform future bus services by providing you with data such as reliability, access to employment sites, but also existing wealth of evidence that's already in TFM, such as the transport-related social exclusion. We're also, we have a regional forum for bus transport officers, and we will hopefully be developing 2 new working groups this year, one that will be national for franchising and one that's national for rural bus services. And this will be to provide you with some best practice, but also so you can work together and come across how to overcome challenges that are common to each of you. We'll then be doing this year, that will be presenting in June, some policy recommendations to government and a letter with statutory advice to say how we think the North should be supported by government in terms of increasing that bus patronage in the North. And there will be an action plan for TFN to deliver, which will be over the coming years and set out how we will be actively supporting you in delivering your bus service improvement plans.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I've got a lot of people wanting to come in. I can start with Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Stephen, thank you. This is an issue which is crucially important. You identified that. Not least because, on a personal level, I live in a household with 2 strong women, neither of whom drive. So they tell me very strongly about the importance of public transport and buses in particular. But it isn't just about the personal issue in my household. You know, in the northeast of England, it has with an area which has the lowest level of car ownership. And, believe me, it's not because we have a fantastic bus system, right? Median household income in my borough, Gateshead, is £30,000, £12,000 below the national average. That's the reason why we have low car ownership. So it's incredibly important. And I've enjoyed working with the Department of Transport on this issue. I was going to guess, Stephen, you had something to do with the writing of the bus strategy, which was published in March. Yeah, we are. Fabulous, fantastic document. I read it from cover to cover, and I'm a Labour politician from the northeast of England, and I could have written it myself. There wasn't a word in it I could disagree with. Okay? It identified all of the issues in terms of dealing with decarbonisation, air quality, dealing with congestion. The issue is not about the policy direction or ambition. The issue is lack of funding. Okay? Across Yorkshire, the North West and the North East, we've seen a decline since 2010 in bus mileage of, I think, something around about 30%. In 2023, to March 2023, it was, I think, an 18% decline. And the bus companies, you know, the bus operators effectively have been subject to a defibrillator to get the heart going, and we've got them in unconscious on life support in ICU. They're literally on the bottom, okay? BSOG funding has been extended, okay? I'm not sure when that date runs out, but we were being notified before the last extension by the bus operators in the North East, and it'll be the same elsewhere. We've been notified of reductions in service of 30%. 30% on top of what we've seen in terms of decline thus far. When the bus strategy was published, Bus Back Better, I think it was called, Bus Back Better, was published in March 2021, I was being advised that, you know, there was money being available for bus service improvement grants, and the figure that was being circulated at the time was £4.2 billion. That was subsequently revised down, because, you know, as all governments do, they include money which is already allocated for other purposes and has already been spent, okay? So keep it down to 2 billion, and ultimately down to, I think, 1.2 billion. In the North East, we bid, you know, the bus service improvement bid that we put in was ambitious. We sought not just to halt the decline in bus usage, but over a period to increase bus usage by 5%. Really, you know, I'm sure you've worked on this, the plan, and the plan from other areas, Stephen. It's very well respected. I think we've got a really incredible team of officers working in this area. The bid that we put in, though, was for £804 million, which would have achieved those policy objectives, the shared policy objectives between government and by local authorities, to stop the decline in bus usage and to increase over a period of 5 years by 5 years. It was going to cost £804 million. That would be on infrastructure and in terms of reducing fares and making fare structures more attractive. It would cost £804 million. Now, we did well, the North East of England. We did better than any other region in the country. We got £168 million. Thank you very much. We are using that effectively, but it's kind of like taking one step forward, but you're moving several miles backwards because the funding just isn't sufficient. Now, we can sit around a table forever talking about it. We can agree with government ministers forever about it, share the same policy objectives, which is to deal with, you know, climate change, air quality, reducing preventable deaths, improving the quality of life. But without the funding, sorry, I'm going to quote the young lady, it's just blah, blah, blah. Okay? We're literally just sending off hot air, making sort of ambitious policy objectives, but we're not putting funding in to secure those objectives.
Councillor Rowland?
Thank you. I mean, I have a couple of questions. Obviously, the Rural Mobility Fund has been absolutely great for us, and, you know, it's going to really help going forward. And I think going forward, it is the funding. How far can we plan in the future, and how resilient we can make these services? But as an area, we are restricted by what we can do with one operator who tells us what we're doing, and not the other way around. We wanted to apply for the Zebra 2 funding, and we couldn't because they would not support us, because nationally they only supported a few. So I think it'd be really good to have DFT support on this to help us. And obviously I see in the report the commitments for the National Bus Strategy are reviewing whether it remains right that local authorities cannot set up new bus companies. It's obviously for our authority to set up one would be beneficial, because there's a lot of things that we can't do and we are restricted by these operators.
Okay, Steve, I'll come back to you if you can wind up sort of generally. Councillor Mumby.
Yes, that just picking up on that point there. Municipal bus companies, I think I didn't see it in any detail at all, other than you might look at it. I think I'd like to put a play for that, is that they actually included in there, and that they're included looking forward as an option, not a replacement, but as another option to franchising as well. So I'll allow municipal bus companies, because I think that played a big part in Warrington's Zebra bid, and our 105 new electric buses on the way to our town as we speak. So that played a big part in that. So I think it's consider that and put it in the review we've got going forward. And again, like everyone else, we're very thankful for the money we received, but it's not enough.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Again, so this refers to funding, Chair, but thanks very much for the very lucid presentation. Section 22, community bus providers do approach our council and others, saying that in particular the £2 bus fare may have helped commercial prices, less favourable for them. In many cases they don't have the staff power to actually operate, and when they can't, that puts them even more at risk of competition from the local commercial providers. We have some ongoing issues with that. And I also just wondered whether there's been any government movement on discrete funding for post-16 home to school and college funding. I'm aware there have been several parliamentary questions on this topic from various parties, and I wondered whether the government had rethought this at all.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I think the BSIP funding initiative has been a great thing for all local authorities, really, and it's something that we should continue to support. But I do agree with what other people have been saying about the actual funding. It doesn't matter how much you get, you always want more, and you need more to actually provide what the services that you want to do. And we're talking about funding. You mentioned about the 800 odd funding there. North East Lincolnshire put in for a bid for 50 million and we got 4.7. You know, it's not enough in the length of thing what you want to do with the transport hubs and the other thing, and tackling, you know, carbon neutral properties and all that sort of thing. So we know that the fund is not enough, but I'm pleased that the amount that we are getting from North East Lincolnshire, for North East Lincolnshire, and I'm sure that we're using it in a great way. And we talk about concessionary fares, the scheme from that. There's a lot of regeneration work going on in Grimsby and North East Lincolnshire and Cleethorpes, through government funding from the Levelling Up. But to provide those facilities for the bus services, we needed to actually tackle concessionary fares. And I'm pleased that the Department of Transport have let us use some of our BSIP money for the concessionary fares to do it prior to 0930. And that obviously, the infrastructure we've got put in place for diagnostic centres and that sort of thing, for hospital appointments, doctor's appointments and everything else, is very much welcome. And I'm pleased that we are working with the DFT to let us use that fund in other ways. And it's a great initiative that I will support always. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mayor Burnham.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to firstly give you credit, Stephen, for the job that you've done, because I think there is a big change underway in bus services in England. I think you were humble enough to acknowledge that maybe not everything is there and could be improved, and I think that is a correct statement, but I do think you should take, and your team and the department, significant credit for the change that's now starting to come through, and obviously we're at the forefront of that. We will go into our second stage of franchising at the weekend in Rochdale, Oldham, North Manchester, a little bit of Tameside and the rest of Bury, so over half of our city region will be under public control at that point. I just want to make an offer to colleagues around the table. We are sharing all of our experience. I think some of you have been in touch with us. the key thing I would want to get out to, and it does come back to what Councillor Gann and Councillor Rollo, Councillor Swinburne have just made around funding. People often say, can we afford franchising? You hear that a lot when they come and get in touch with us. I would put it the other way, can you afford not to? Because the evidence from Greater Manchester is that per kilometre, franchise services are coming in a third cheaper than the old tendered contracts that we used to have to do. And the problem with those tendered contracts is that it leaves councillors on the back foot, because an operator says, oh, we're going to have to get rid of that service. And how do you negotiate in that situation? You're over a barrel, aren't you? And you pay over. So the public money is not well used, I would say, in a deregulated context. It's much better used in a franchise context, because also if you have policies like the £2 cap and patronage goes up, the upside of that comes back to the public fare box. So I would make a plea that has been looking at some of the things that could be ironed out in the policy in the Bus Services Act. It is a little bureaucratic. We found it difficult. It was too open to legal challenge, and we found ourselves in that position, as you know. I would say let all areas franchise, let all of the local authorities represented around this table do it, because from a public money, best use of public money point of view, the evidence to me is already clear that you get better use of public money in doing it. My last point is then just to pick up the funding point again more broadly. The government has done a very good thing in giving us a capital pipeline for transport through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. That is enormously valuable to us, and we can really sort of plot now almost 10 years ahead and start to really think through. That is really valuable. We do need, I think, as Councillor Swinburne, Councillor Rollo particularly said, that we've got to move away from bid for funding, project funding, to a sustained revenue stream for areas that sits alongside a sustained capital stream. When you have that, then everywhere will be able to start to plan for much better transport services. And in an era where it might be hard for funds to be found at a national level, more fiscal freedom perhaps on something like tourist tax is a case we will start to make, because why not? Every other European cities I think charges one. If you can't do it nationally, at least give us the ability to raise more locally, because there is a bus revolution underway actually. Steve will be next. I think it'll be Tracy now who's made the decision. Others are making the same decision. Glasgow was voted last week to make the same decision. This is starting to happen everywhere. I would say plan it with everybody and give everywhere the chance to do it, and then structure the manufacturing requirement that comes from that with our bus manufacturers across the country. It could be a golden age for bus services in England, but it needs structuring and planning and everywhere with the ability to do it, I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We're very grateful for our Phase 3 BSIP money. We need it to be, you need to make it easier for us to be able to use it, spend it. The restriction on revenue is causing all kinds of problems. I mean, we're now moving on to, we need to improve the bus infrastructure, public information systems, etc. And you really don't make it very easy for us. And a second question, if I may, you talked about the AV regulations. I've had some of my small and medium operators expressing real concerns about the cost of this. So I would like to know if there's going to be any help from DFT with meeting the new regulations.
Thank you very much indeed. I endorse Mayor Burnham's comments. I think it's really heartening that we're talking about a national bus strategy here, but so many of the decisions and the delivery are being done in places across the north, and we are well on the way in South Yorkshire to bringing our buses back under public control. What I wanted to just highlight in particular was that point around that the BSIP funding has had winners and losers so far, and you noted South Yorkshire, and we are working on a proposal for the next round at the current moment. A couple of questions about how buses interact with our clean air plan for Sheffield and Rotherham. You mentioned that the Zebra 2 decisions will be announced soon. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that. And also, you'll be aware that there was a survey that was study that was conducted about retrofitting buses to make them cleaner. That technology has not worked, and there is a study, we are told, which has not been released about that. We want replacement buses, not retrofit buses. So I just wondered if you knew what the timeline was for releasing that study, and then what the alternatives will be for places like ours, where buses are so central for meeting our clean air targets. Thank you.
No, thanks, Chair, and thanks for your report. Gratefully received. I think we'd all like to know how long the £2 fare cap is going to go on for, and also whether or not in the plan for drivers the local transport authorities will still be able to enact bus priority measures, because there is some concern around what's going to happen to powers around that. I think also in York we did okay with BSIP, and of course it's well received, but we're still cutting services. So none of us are getting the amount of money that we need to be able to provide the services that our residents and our strategy quite rightly wants us to deliver. And I think the issue that we've got, especially for those of us that have got large rural areas, is that we are constantly trying to square the circle of trying to provide a public service, as outlined in the strategy document, with organisations who are in it to make a profit. And particularly where you're not franchised, you don't really have a very clear idea of where those profits are and where those profits aren't. Trying to square that circle has proved impossible for most local transport authorities, and it's good to see the developments that are happening in terms of franchise, many of which have had to be fought for that weren't actually enabled. I think this board should start to think a little bit bigger, actually. I think we're only going to get the economies of scale that we need to provide services everywhere that we want to provide them if we start to look beyond our own local authorities and our own city regions. And I think franchising or other for the entire north should most certainly be on the table, and it's something that I think TfN could look at. We greatly appreciate the support that TfN provides with our local bus service improvement plans and negotiations, etc. I think it's time for us to look bigger, and we heard earlier about what is the role of this body going to be going forward as we start to look at local transport settlements. Well, maybe that's something that we could look at. What economies of scale will it give us? If it's a third cheaper for us to be in charge of the bus networks ourselves, what economies of scale will that give us across the whole of the north?
Thank you. Councillor Homer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Our enhanced bus partnership seems to be working quite well, and we've had some generous amounts of money from DfT. We've done quite well out of it in Hull. The issues for us, I guess, are, like was mentioned, with the revenue restrictions. So doing basic things like updating real-time information at bus shelters is a problem for us, and finding the funding for that. Another challenge, I guess, is tight deadlines to submit paperwork, which doesn't take account of internal processes within the council. So we're often running around at last minute trying to make sure that the internet won't go down or something as we're submitting it at the 11th hour. I think there's also something to be done in terms of messaging, particularly kind of post-COVID. The message needs to come out that it's safe to catch the bus now. That hasn't come out strong enough for me, and that's holding back some within Hull, where our levels are about just under 80%, I think, of pre-COVID levels. So there's still a potential, to get money back on the bus. And I suppose as well, some sort of messaging encouraging people to leave the car at home, because we don't just want people coming back to the buses, but we want to encourage people to switch their mode of transport. So anything around that would certainly help.
A couple of things I'd like to just highlight, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's good to see the increase. One, I'll let Sam come on to in a moment in terms of franchising in rural areas. But one of the things that come up from a lot of business I'm talking to at the moment is the connectivity between trains and the bus connection. So if you're working in Audley Park, as an example, actually you have to wait at the train station for about 3/4 of an hour for a 1 mile trip. So it's having a massive issue. in terms of recruitment for a lot of different employers where they can't get that connectivity between various transport systems. So again, I'd just like to encourage that cross-transport thinking and making sure that we're thinking really quite strategically about that from an employer point of view. The other piece is around cross-border. And it's something certainly I think with Cheshire sat in between Liverpool and Manchester in other ways. We've got, is really thinking about how do we work really closely together. So that's something, again, I'd like to just highlight. The tap on, tap off of cross-border, cross-transport is really important. We're not making it very easy for people at the moment to be able to plan. You know, the information system around your bus service, around how that connects with your transport, we're all relying on Google Maps probably, isn't good enough. And actually we do need to ensure that we're thinking about how do we make sure that we're enhancing that communication. I agree with all the points that were made a moment ago regarding, I think we have got a much bigger opportunity when we think about AI, data, agility, in terms of how do we make sure that we're providing a bus service to people when they need it, and how do we make sure that we're using technology to be able to do that, and they're doing that very well in other areas around Europe. And the other area that I think we are starting to go down the franchise route and think about a northern strategy on that, which I think is sensible, is can we just give some thought to the procurement criteria? So we're talking about you know, how much the fees, the revenues and the fare box might be, but also we need to think about sustainability, we need to think about safety, we need to think about effective communication with employers. And at the moment, we've got a huge opportunity when we're thinking about procurement in any of our transport schemes, and I'm not sure we're using that as effectively as we can to make sure that we're looking at all of those key stakeholders when we're looking at our procurement criteria. So I'd like to really encourage a shift in that. So, yeah, that was my rather number of points, sorry. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. I've got two comments and a question. The first comment is over your figures about the number of people who are now back on buses. And I would certainly endorse that from Cheshire East. We've got some routes now where the fare-paying passengers are above what they were pre-pandemic, but the concessionary passengers are well below. Not sure whether that's because people have got different habits, they're now shopping from home and getting it delivered rather than going out, or whether that's just elderly people are still nervous about getting on buses post-COVID. But I would endorse those figures. The second one, to follow up on what Claire said about franchising, we do look across the border to Manchester to see what's happening there. And I did like your phrase of franchising in a way that works, and I'm sure that's something that Cheshire and Warrington would be interested in pursuing maybe later. And then the question is that the DFT has previously stated that specific guidance on buses in rural areas will be published to help councils deliver services in rural areas. Do you have an indication of the timescale for that?
Well, thanks everyone. Stephen, there's quite a sort of second reading debate there to respond to. If you a number of questions, particularly about revenue and sort of flexibility within the department. So can you take a stab at trying to address some of those concerns and give us your thoughts? Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to indeed. And if I don't pick everything up, very happy to kind of come back sort of via the TFN team on any sort of specific points that I don't pick up in the time we've got right now. I think that let's start on the funding, because I think that was one of the significant themes that ran through. I think everybody's absolutely right. You know, the original amount of money that was identified was 3 billion. There was at least a perception that would be 3 billion specifically for bus service improvement plans. In the National Bus Strategy, we said some of that would need to go into pandemic support, some of that would be around zero-emission buses. And when you actually look back over what have we put in over this Parliament, we are looking actually in total, given all the pandemic support and all the other things we need to put in, and this is excluding the CRSTS elements, at about 4.5 billion. So the total is way over what we said it was going to be. And that, to be fair, that includes some of the money going beyond the Parliament into the HS2 money, but it's still going to be well over the 3 billion. And I think in terms of the longevity, I hear that point loud and clear. I mean, we've made good progress on the capital side. We've not given you the year-by-year profiles yet, but every authority in this room, through either local transport fund or CRSTS, now has a capital allocation out to 2032, which is, from my perspective, fantastic, probably better than anybody anywhere else in the entire transport sector in terms of capital funding. Obviously, as officials, we get the ideal benefit of doing that for revenue as well. That is always more difficult to achieve for revenue funding within government than it is for capital. We will continue to have those conversations and make the case. I think the place where we may have the first opportunity to try and make that case is around the certainty over that BSIP Phase 3 funding reallocated from HS2, and we are certainly going to make sure we continue to have those conversations about what the art of the possible is with our colleagues in the Treasury and our finance team. I think to pick up on the sort of what you can use the money for flexibility, I think the revenue funding in BSIP 3 was very much designed to be for services, and ministers sort of took it from other parts of departmental funding to really keep services supported. Suggestion from us would be look at those local transport fund and CRSTS allocations for capital investment in the sort of medium term if needed. But if there's a particular circumstance locally where it would be a completely stupid use of the money to spend it on services, on resource, we're open to that conversation in a local context. I think to pick up on the funding point about buses and accessible information, there is 4.6 million of funding that's available for that for smaller operators, and that's by our partners in the real-time information group. And I think it'll be later this year that applications for that will be open. So there are opportunities there for those smaller operators. And to pick up on the point on franchising in rural areas, I would be very happy to have that conversation with anybody. The actual legislative powers are deliberately very, very broad. Franchising doesn't have to look like a Manchester model or like the proposal in Liverpool or like London. There are all sorts of models, and I've personally been able to see the one in Jersey, which is quite different and much more in a kind of rural kind of setup. So there are definitely options. And just on the rural area advice, I will double check and come back, but I think that will be picked up in the context of partly the learnings from the Rural Mobility Fund, but also in the work we're doing on the socially necessary services guidance. So we'll pick that up there. But very happy to pick up other points offline.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Louise, you just wanted to come in. Sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on one of the common themes was about franchising right across the north, and I think we've got a paper coming in June, and whether we could include that as an option to look at.
Martin.
Chair, I think what we wanted out of this debate was the kind of real clear focus from the board members about what we need to target that advice on. So we'll be working with your officers and then through our regular scrutiny and processes to develop that advice to come back. But there's been some key themes there which I think we can focus on adding value because they are applicable to all partners. So very useful for the debate in June.
Stephen, can I thank you very much for answering the points. If there are some points on reflection you feel you've not answered, if you do want to drop us a note back, then we can sort of feed that in, because I think this will form part of a bigger discussion at the June meeting. I know we're getting a bit tight now for time, and various people are having to go because of other appointments. Yeah, of course. Sure.
I mean, local authorities have been given so much for transport and highway improvements. Is this going to be above that, or is that part of it?
So that was a comparator between the funding we provided in 2019-20 and the total we will be providing in 2024-25, so it includes it.
Okay, fine, thank you. We'll move on then to item number 11. This has been circulated. I just asked for approval. I know we're now tight for time. Unless anybody particularly wants to say anything on it, I've taken quite an interest in it. It is pre-legislative scrutiny. There's a lot of time before this actually gets even to be debated in Parliament. Although we are doing this to the Transport Select Committee, which are doing the pre-leg scrutiny. Is everybody content with that? Thanks. Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. And the Rail North Committee update, Martin.
Chair, Mayor Burnham had to apologise to because he had to leave for another appointment. I think the key thing that he would want to have emphasised is the key work that's been done by the Committee on Accessibility to Stations, and particularly the focus that they've given on having a programme that could be put forward to address that over the next 10 years. That's the key thing from Mayor Burnham on behalf of the Rail North Committee. You've got the rest of the report there to be noted.
Okay. Is everybody content with that? That brings us to the end of the agenda. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, the 18th of June, in Liverpool. So can I thank everybody for attendance and wish them a safe journey back to their home destination.